Can you put it on your screen? Can you share
Yeah,
it?
I can't share it, so I'm gonna have to forward it to somebody else.
Joy, can you forward it to Dan Secor? And Brianna, can you do it too?
How about Dan? We'll send it to Dan.
Yeah, send it to Dan Secor.
You probably
haven't-
have to give her the email address and she's muted.
Okay.
and
This thing looks
anything
weird.
else.
I unmuted her.
Oh, Dan got it. Okay, cool.
You got
Yeah,
it, Dan?
Yeah, I'll send it to that email.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
How was your day, Dan?
This is the highlight, if that means anything.
Oh, it's 7 o'clock.
All right. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of Wednesday, April 29th of the Board of Finance. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
liberty
and justice for all. All right. Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
Glenn,
Is
no,
Ricky Ramos on yet?
I was gonna say no Ricky today.
Well, I mean, we got to start. I mean, we got
Yeah.
enough to start. He's going to have to catch up. And
Okay.
public comment, going once, going twice, 3 times.
Let's roll.
All right, let's go right to the, since this special meeting, the boys' locker room. If we could, and get that out of the way, and then we're gonna roll into Marcia and Steve's reports. Joy, are you ready? Joy? Are you ready, Joy?
Yeah, I'm trying to email it to Dan. Unless I can, okay, hold on, just give me 1 minute.
All right, before Joy starts, while she's getting ready, and anybody who's listening, since we do have as a Board of Finance, we do have the mandate now to set capital as well as setting the budget, operating budget. We are going to listen to the boys' locker room presentation, because before, when we told them to delay it to June, we thought we could not change the capital, that it was set. So not saying we're gonna add money, not saying we're gonna take money away. This is just a listening process, so we understand it. As part of our thought process as a group has been, we're not looking at this COVID thing as a 1-year process. We're looking at it as a 2 to 3 year strategy as part of our thought process. So this is just part of the information gathering.
Glenn, can I just jump in there? This is cash capital, just to clarify.
This is bonded.
Bonded, you still have to have a town meeting and a referendum if it's over 1 million.
But we don't know it's gonna be over 1 million. That's what we're listening to, right?
Oh,
So,
if
I
you
mean,
push it under 1 million, then you still have to have a town meeting.
yeah,
You're talking about
okay.
the total package, not any individual item.
Okay, this one,
But
Okay,
we did approve 300,000 in this current bonded, Steve, right?
yes. Yeah,
So we need to understand the big picture, because maybe we're readjusting some things, right? You may,
okay. Yep,
you
I'm
may
with you.
want to adjust some items, right? Based on what we hear. Or you may not. So,
Yep,
okay, so I sent the email to Dan.
And I've got it ready to share when you guys are ready.
Okay, I'll let you know when to share it, Dan, please.
All right.
Okay, so thank you for this opportunity to present to you, collaborate and work closely as boards to come to an understanding and solution that best benefits the community and students of Brookfield. So we as a group, the Board of Ed, Board of Finance, and Board of Selectmen, all need to work together in this process. So we really see this as a partnership, even though this decision is in the hands of the Board of Finance. It really should be a decision by all 3 boards. And we really need your help in doing the project and figuring out the best way to fund it and do it. And we're very mindful that we don't want to rely on any surplus money. We have had some discussions regarding it, specifically applying it to the project. And I can't, begin to stress enough how much public opinion and community support there is out there for the project. I just want to go through quickly some of the series of events that took place after your Board of Finance meeting on April 8th, when I spoke during the public comment. That next morning, I did reach out to Steve Dunn and Mark Mulvaney to address suggestions and comments that were made. I sent our original Tecton presentation and answered any immediate questions that you had. Both the Board of Finance and Steve Dunn emphasized how much they valued Paul Checo's feedback and insight into the project. And you asked me to reach out to him, which I did. We did speak. I'm sure, Paul can speak to what his feedback was, but what I gathered from what we discussed, he feels that this project, needs to be completed in its entirety, that a piecemeal approach doesn't really work, and we need to do it once and do it right. It doesn't really make sense to do it in pieces. He actually recommended more fixtures in the exterior restrooms because what we currently have in the plan is just not enough. Jeff from Tecton also reached out to the state. So there was a grant application inquiry placed. Unfortunately, at this time, the feedback was not favorable, but that doesn't mean that it's out. We are going to go back in and put in another request with more detailed information. So it's not totally out, but at this current time, the feedback is not favorable. So at this time, I'd like to bring up the presentation and go through it. Thank you, Dan. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'll just read the first 2-3 slides are really important. It's our rationale. It's not just a locker room project or weight room facility. It's really to support educators in providing a quality physical and health education program to improve the well-being and health of our children and youth. All the research shows that in order to encourage adolescent development, schools can play a really vital role in establishing a healthy behavior patterns among young people that carry into adulthood. Every school day provides millions of students in the United States the opportunity to learn the importance of healthy lifestyles and skills necessary to engage in healthy behaviors. So schools don't only provide, they're critical outlets to provide and reach millions of children and adolescents to promote lifelong healthy behaviors. And this project is a place to do that. Our students are constantly engaging in these behaviors, such as to contribute directly to students' ability to successfully adopt and practice behaviors that protect and promote health and avoid or reduce health risks. Next slide. So the spaces are utilized 345 days a year for PE, health classes, and athletics by about 350 students a day, and that doesn't include visitors. The weight rooms utilized every day for PE and health classes, as well as during all 4 seasons by every sport. It's often overcrowded, but also not able to be used to its capacity, as size restrictions prevent providing enough fitness and cardio equipment to support PE and health classes or athletics. And this is where the NIASC comes in. Their specific recommendation was develop a plan to resolve the issues with the boys' locker room and showers. The recommendation needs to be promptly addressed, which we can talk about more in detail. So in order to improve our health and PE curriculum, we need to do right by these facilities because they're really the backbone to these programs and experiences that we're offering our students and the programs that we want and need to provide our students. We broke down also the rationale into some important areas. So supervision, we have a lack of supervision currently. So this plan provides for lower lockers, bathroom upgrades, and office location. The way the office is situated currently does not allow for proper supervision of students and athletes. We want to take pride in our facilities, and this plan provides an upgrade to the facility that's not right now functional, lit well, and it's very outdated. Work hasn't been done since 1974. And as we know how students and athletes feel in a facility, transmit to how they're going to act and behave and perform as an athlete. So, and a renovation shows an investment in our students. The transitions, though the layout it's not efficient. So this is a more efficient floor plan, which keeps our physical education students and athletic team rooms separate, making changing for classes quicker and more contained, which in turn increases instructional time. And equity is a big thing. We did work to the girls' locker room, and this will create equity for the boys as well. And it allows us to take entire classes into the space and all students to exercise at the same time. And this allows for updating us to have fully functional cardiovascular equipment. Like I explained before, we only have one elliptical and one treadmill, and one of which is not working. Okay, next slide. So like I said before, the girls' locker room project was completed in 2007 renovation. And the boys' locker room hasn't been renovated since 1974. So concerns with our existing conditions: no showers are functional. Other than the 2 single-user toilet rooms, there's no handicap accessible amenities, plumbing, lockers, or benches. Ventilation is insufficient. There's no physical separation in the locker room. So supervisory issue during the day is an issue, and teams can hear each other, often causing tension. Teams must share a bathroom, crossing paths in order to do so. Referees have no privacy to change or shower. And our high schools uses the town shelter, which is very important, and there's not enough plumbing fixtures to accommodate this use. Okay, next slide. Next. So here's a picture of the existing lockers. As you can see, they're in poor physical condition. All are in a state of disrepair and are rusted, and many units are not functional. I don't know if some of you had the opportunity to go in there to see them firsthand, but I would say they look worse up. Okay, this next slide. So the shower and office are currently not functional. Spaces can be used as a possible expansion of the weight room for PE classes and athletics. So here's the area where there's non-working showers that are now used as storage, and one bathroom is no longer accessible. Here is the exterior access to where we would have for the exterior bathrooms. So right now we have portable bathrooms that are required for outdoor PE classes and athletic events. These are only cleaned once a week. Lighting is inadequate, and they can't be accessed by the elderly or families who need a changing station. This space was originally designed as a custodial closet, but it's currently being used as a water filling station for drinking, and definitely needs to be renovated to properly serve that purpose. Next slide. So again, supervision is problematic due to the physical separation issues between home and the visitor locker rooms, and between the PE locker room and the team room during the day. There's also inefficiencies due to the angles out of the space. Okay, the plan development, go to the next slide. So here is our existing conditions as it is right now, layout. Okay, the next slide. These are the major features of our proposed plan. Okay, so you can see the separation of the team and locker rooms, all new lockers and benches, improved sight lines, new shower room, new toilet rooms, expansion of the weight training room, additional offices, separation of storage rooms, and all spaces and elements are fully accessible. And here is just a breakdown of the cost of each section, and a breakdown of in each option in each area. I know you'd probably need some more time to look at this in more detail, but that's available for you.
Can you send that to us, Joyce, please?
Sure. I sent it to you, Steve, an email.
You did?
Yeah, it's in the original email, the email I sent you that next day after the April 8th meeting, but I can resend it again to everyone.
No, I'll look. Thanks.
Well, yeah, in all fairness, I've already noticed a couple of the slides you've changed since the one you sent to me and Steve. So I'll need time to review this one too,
Yeah, absolutely.
because I don't know if anything else changed.
Okay, if you could resend it, that'd be great.
Sure. Okay, next slide. Yeah, again, you'll need some more time to go over that. So it's 8,532 square feet. And that's the total construction cost of the project, 1,322,824. So that's approximately 155 square feet. Tecton had mentioned that if it went out to bid again, it would be substantially higher square footage. And typically a renovate as new would be much more.
What does that, Joy, what does that mean if it went out to bid again? I don't understand what that.
Tecton was saying that if current, like if in this current situation, if we went out to bid again, rebid with somebody else, or at this time, it could possibly be a lot more per square foot.
So, is somebody committing to do it for 1.3, or is that the original estimate? And now, when we do go to bid, it's going to be dramatically more. I don't understand what that means.
No, we're locked in at the 1.3, the cost of the project
By who?
from Tecton to do the work.
No, that's just for the 1.3, Jay, if I may, Joy, if I may step in for a moment. This is the estimate.
We
from
need your
Tec-
name and address for the record.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry, I was on the video, Mark. My apologize. Paul Checo, 29 Dorset Lane, Brookfield, Connecticut. Hi, Mark. Joy, this is the estimate that was prepared by the design team for this work. It still would be subject to public bidding requirements. So Dan, your question is, no, we're not locked in. But we'll get to that in a moment because I have some thoughts surrounding this a little bit.
Okay, great, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome, Joy.
Okay, next slide. You can go to the next one. So here's the alternate, the plans. So what you see that's colored is in addition to everything in white is the base work, what we currently have functioning right now. So the green is alternate 5. We'll go through all the alternates specifically one at a time. You'll see alternate 1 is going to be the red area, which is the new cardio and existing weight training room and expanding that. Alternate 2 is the locker room off of that weight training room with the toilet room in there. At alternate 3 is the excess toilet rooms. And 4, just move that down. You could slide that down a little bit. Okay, there we go. And 5 is the storage areas, and 4 also interior storage rooms, 4 and 5. Okay, next slide. So here's in more detail about that. Okay, the next slide. So here is the breakdown, which you'll see in the next remaining slides. All the alternates, the cost. Okay, the total cost of the project. So total, and this is prior to, so this is assuming that we had 605 approved in the capital budget.
I'm sorry, Joy. This is Brianna. I just have a quick question. Is the alternates in addition to the 1.3 or there to be slotted in
No, that's slotted in.
in lieu of something else in the 1.3?
No, so all the alternates, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Mm-hmm.
That's a total of 616,425. In
Right.
addition to the base.
Okay.
You'll see
Thank
when
you.
the next slides will be more clear.
Okay. Thanks.
You can go to the next slide. So potential options. So we broke it down to options. Option 1 would be the base work. So now it's like the purple area that you see, light purple area, and all 5 alternates. And you'll see it on the right-hand side. So the cost of that, so that's the whole scope of the project, is 1,322,824. So approved means what the Board of Ed approved in their capital budget. That was prior to what you approved, the 300,000. So this is prior to that. If you can move this screen down just a little bit. So delta meaning how much more we would have to come up with 717,824 to do this option. So that's the weight training, spending the
That's
weight.
That's 605 is not approved by the Board of Finance. That was the Board of Ed approval. So there's
Correct,
only 300,000 approved. So you really need 1 million
correct,
plus or minus more.
right. Okay, option 2 is the base with the weight training, expanding the weight training cardio. Also that office and toilet area and the exterior, the 3 to alternate 3 exterior toilet rooms. So the cost of that work is 1,217,865. So we would have to, so assuming that prior to that, 605,000 would be 612,865. So I guess you'd have to add 300,000 to that, would be 912,865. Okay, option 3 is the base and the weight training area, the alternate 1, and then alternate 3 is the exterior toilet rooms. So the cost of this work would be 1,137,120. So adding the 300 to the 532 would be 832,120. Option 4 is the base and the alternate 3 exterior toilet rooms. So the cost of this work is 826,479. I want to mention with option 4 as the facilities subcommittee and also the full board, we did feel that this was non-negotiable. Obviously the base of the work is important, but one of our non-negotiables was the exterior toilet rooms. We felt that that was our due diligence for the community and our students to really see that through, that alternate. Okay, and the next option was option 5 is just doing the base work. So just to do the bare minimum base work, the cost of that would be 706,399. So just adding the 300 onto that would bring it a little bit over 1 million.
So
May I
the,
comment here?
Excuse me?
Steve Dunn here.
Oh.
On the external bathrooms, I think we need at least 1 unisex toilet. And I don't see any place where people could change their children's diapers. And I think we should address that in that. I don't know how you do it, but I'd like to see that.
Okay. Well,
Steve, Paul Checo here. We have talked with Tecton. We on the MBC felt that 2 fixtures in each one of these toilet rooms wasn't enough either for the capacity. So we did speak with Tecton. That's why this is a draft plan at this point. It was a large broad brush concept that we're looking to revisit, but not increase the cost.
Okay, thank you, Paul. That's important.
so what would be the access to the external bathrooms? Who would they be for and when would they be available? Is it during events or during, what's the, is it?
so it would be accessible to yes, to outdoor events. So like football games and things like that. And also to opposing teams, and anyone in the locker room could use those as well.
Yep.
There would be a locked door so the students couldn't exit the building.
Nice.
From
Joy,
this plan, it looks like that only the boys' bathroom is available. Okay, I got you. Never mind.
Yeah, it would be accessible to everyone.
So Mark Mulvaney here, all these plans still, you're going to have this issue, as you guys are calling it, with the visiting team having to walk through the home team's locker room. That hasn't changed on any of these.
Well, I suppose they could walk through
No, they could walk through out another entrance now, but for whatever reason, they're not allowed to do that. So now, and in all of these, you're still going through that same hallway to cross them over. So Either it's not a problem or it's a problem and we failed to address it.
No, the problem is right now, Mark, it's Paul Checo again, that there's no physical separation. There's no doorway between the two.
Paul,
So what would happen?
Paul, don't talk to me about a doorway. There's a frame.
No, Mark,
doorway.
let
Nobody
me explain to you
went
what I spoke
door
with
slam.
Tecton about. It
What?
was that the way they stage people coming in, right now, there's no physical separation between the two. So the addition of the doorway, the rearrangement of the offices is providing a separation. The visiting team gets brought in first with their coaches. They shut the door. Home team comes in, home team exits, and then visiting team exits.
So Paul,
Given the current layout we have, there's no feasible way without expanding footprint to do two side-by-side home and visiting team locker rooms.
but all you're doing there is putting a door in a hall that already has a door frame and just has no door.
That's a portion of it.
That's it.
That's a
That's
portion
what
in
we're talking
base
about.
5. But if you go to some of the other work that's going on with the rearrangement of the team locker room, that's where the bigger work comes in.
And also keep in mind that the physical separation of the two parts is not, like Paul said, that's only one part of the rationale for the renovation. The other issues are, aging facilities, lockers that are falling apart and are damaged, and of course the supervision sight lines that are not available in the current plan as we have it.
Right.
I'm going to let Joy finish and then I'm going to speak when I'm allowed by the chairman.
Okay, next slide. That's it. So those are the 5, those are the 5 options. Again, what the board had discussed was, again, if you can go back to option 3.
All right. Before I let Mark go on this, on your also capital that we're talking about, we have $110,000 out there for the outside bathrooms and I believe something else. Is any of that money available for this on the outside bathrooms? And then secondary question is, I think it's your alternative 4, the storage room and the corridor to the right of the bathrooms that are placed in the outdoors. Why couldn't you expand those to bathrooms and eliminate the need for bathrooms on the outside? I mean, you got storage elsewhere, you got storage built in. I see 4 different storage areas that could we not utilize one of those storage spaces to accommodate the bathrooms that are needed and utilize some of that 110,000 to offset?
Hey, Glenn, Paul Checo. We did speak with Tecton about expanding, well, as Steve said, a single user toilet room or a family bathroom. With the expansion of the toilets that are currently shown, we would like to get those to 4 fixtures. So yes, again, it's a draft plan, it's a concept. There were comments made by the NBC on this plan, and that storage room is one of those areas that we would look to expand into.
All
As
right,
far as
so-
the money part, I don't know. That's not my,
No. So before then, all right, before we go to Mark, Paul, what's your opinion on what you see? And then we'll let Mark address the whole process.
my opinion on what I see, and this is purely from a building standpoint, nothing to do with cost, is that if we're going to do it, we should just do it, whether it's over a single year capital or 2 years worth of capital. We could go back to the state. This plan is a draft. I think it has its faults, but I think those faults can be worked out, and that wouldn't increase the budget. There's some conversation we've had with Dr. Burrill and with Steve Baldwin about some of the items that are shown, how they could be revisited, what's really absolutely necessary, and really what's wish list, and then what's program related and what's really for athletics. Because to me, program related space is a lot more important at this juncture than athletics.
Okay.
So the thought I had, and I spoke with Dr. Burrill about, was that.
Wait, I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Paul? my printer was making noise. What was more important than athletics?
For me, program space.
Thank you.
Cardio, PE, program spaces always takes precedence over athletics because the kids are there for the primary purpose is for education.
Understood. Just didn't hear what you said. Thanks.
No problem. So with Dr. Burrill, speaking with Dr. Burrill and with Steve Baldwin and Tecton, and looking at the 1.3, it was brought up that, look, this work's not getting done this summer. So if you had the initial appropriation of approximately half, we could design the work, go out, get real bids, come back next May or next budget season with real numbers for the delta. And, you know, we can adjust that delta through scope up or down as we need to accommodate what we're thinking in next budget season. That was one thought we had, because again, this work can't get designed and built this summer. So we do have 2 budget seasons to do this.
Well, Paul, that goes back to my question from before, which is, I was very confused. It sounded like the budget was based upon 150 per square foot, and if we go out to bid, it's going to be 2 to 3x that. So it sounds like, you know, this $1.3 million project could be $3 to $5 million if it gets truly bid on. Is that?
No, that hasn't been my that hasn't been the information that we received from Tecton.
So go back the few slides before that said that talked about the cost per square foot is 150, and if it got rebid on today, it would be 350 or something.
That was Renovate as new projects. This isn't a Renovate as new. This is a renovation. So Renovate as new is when you totally gut the entirety of the space. You're ripping up, you know, the sub-slab plumbing, and all major systems get entirely removed and replaced. Here we're utilizing roofing.
They are doing that in this.
Pardon?
They are doing that in this. They're relocating, adding bathrooms, relocating showers across the way. They are doing it. So
We are doing, but we're not replacing the water lines that are overhead that aren't leaking. We're not tearing out everything, Mark.
you're going to end up
So,
with most of them. You
What?
know it. I know it. We've all been there.
but that's the beauty of going across 2 budget seasons, is that you can sit there and go, all right, guys, this got too fat. It's coming in at 2.4. No, that wasn't the intent. The intent was to go to 1.3. And here's the scope of work you showed us. So, you know, instead of doing 1.3 now.
That bullet point is irrelevant then.
Yeah, Joy, can you explain a little bit more about what Tecton said to you? And I'll have to check this with Jeff and Eddie tomorrow because it wasn't said to us that way. But what they said to you about going out, it could be much more.
So what they explained to us was that because someone had brought up, well, what if someone else did the bid? And that they said it could be more, substantially more. And with our current situation as with the COVID-19, that it could bring up the cost.
And
Yeah,
we're
that's
looking at a plan that doesn't address all the need. I mean, if we're looking, there's already the discussion about having the gender neutral bathrooms and more spaces for a family bathroom. I mean, that I imagine would only drive up the cost even more versus renovating a hallway into a storage closet.
I'd have to get more clarification on that.
This is Marcia. Is there any possibility of getting some reimbursement from a school construction grant? That I know that we can do it for partial things. For example, the last time we got it for a roof. Have you looked into that?
We did ask Barbara, get a Paul check out. We did ask Barbara up in the state if a portion of this or all of it could be eligible for reimbursement. The way it was explained to her initially was that it was for athletics. And that answer came back as no, you know, athletics isn't an item which would be normally reimbursable. However, in clarifying this with Dr. Burrill and Steve Baldwin, we've asked them to write a letter to Barbara outlining what the actual intent of this renovation, including the NEASC requirement and the requirement for ADA accessibility, handicap bathrooms, and the programmatic requirements. So they are putting a letter together for Barbara again to ask her to revisit based upon those points.
So Paul, are you saying that if we, and I agree with you here, if we did this renovate as new, we might have a better chance at getting a state grant and our overall costs might be lower?
Not if the driver is purely athletics,
It's
Which is
not
what-
purely though.
which is
right?
why we've asked Dr. Brill and Steve Baldwin to write that letter to Barbara.
Okay, I'm with you.
And just to kind of piggyback off that, and to touch base with Mark, you had mentioned before, and what Paul Checo said, that, you know, this is program related space, that we're turning this weight room into a fitness room. So currently our fitness center is not big enough to support our curriculum for fitness and wellness. So many of our current physical education classes have 28 or more students, which cripples our ability to teach these lifelong fitness concepts. Students are arranged in groups of 3 to 4 at each station, reducing the amount of time for each student to access the equipment. In some cases, groups of students are rotated through a written assignment until a fitness station becomes available. So to ensure the safety of all the students simultaneously engaged in physical activity in the fitness center, we have to limit the number of students exercising at one time. Additionally, we're only equipped with 4 cardiovascular machines. The free weights and weightlifting equipment are geared toward athletic teams. So we're not even able to provide what is needed for our curriculum for fitness and wellness. The showers in the boys' locker room don't function, eliminating the opportunity for students to shower after the physical education classes. So it is a program-related space. It's not just for athletics. That's important to mention.
So Glenn here now. So listening to all this, I think it just reinforces the process of we got to work this together instead of working individually or in different groups. Because if Paul knew that we write the letter to get funding based on not athletics, but academics, we should be going forth with our best foot forward to get these grants as a complete unit. In other words, if Paul knew that, and I'm sure he did, I mean, that's why we asked Paul to come to this meeting. We need, as a group, and I'm not putting any blame on anybody, as a group, understand the expertise that we have within our town to allow us to gain these type of things. Because if Paul knew this going out, the letter would have been addressed towards the academics. Paul, am I speaking out of school?
No, Glenn, you're head on. And unfortunately, during this, social distancing age that we have, we haven't been as collaborative a group as we have in the past. Even with the new school project, though we're moving forward and maybe Steve and I or Greg and I will have conversation, it just isn't as cohesive a process as we would like. So, and I think that's what fell short here, was that Tecton asked the question without really understanding the driver behind it being education.
I agree. Can I just jump in quickly? I think we need to leverage more Paul and the NBC's expertise on these really big projects. And I think Sue and Harry would agree with me that we'll have them involved in this going forward.
Okay, now let me also finish. I mean, what I'm also hearing, and this is to the Board of Ed side of this, is our shower rooms now can't work or dysfunctional. What is the mechanism in place after we spend $1.3 million that we don't get back to this in 3 years from now? I mean, what is the driver behind the upkeep that we don't have functioning showers right now? Because in the house, if my shower stopped functioning, I'd get it fixed and I'd understand the cause. What are we going to do to protect the town's investment?
You know, Glenn, that's a very good question. And you and I have been addressing this for the last 2 years, and some guys on the board for the last 4 years. The town, and I'll just be blunt about this, the town has neglected maintenance of our basic facilities for years, and we have to change that. We have to keep all our facilities. They don't have to be absolutely pristine like the Taj Mahal, but they need to be workable, they need to be clean, they need to be usable. And I think you'll agree with me on that.
I'm not fighting you, actually. I am agreeing, but what mechanism are we going to put forward to protect an investment like this? I guess is, how do we get there?
Well, Glenn, I agree with you, and I think there needs to be accountability. I can't speak for the past because I wasn't a part of the board in the past. My understanding that in many, many years ago, there wasn't a lot of accountability. And I think that with the new administration, you would see a difference and there would be a plan moving forward to protect a project and our facilities in the way that you're describing. It's about accountability. It's how you would hold anyone accountable for, keeping town buildings acceptable and.
Okay. Mark, you wanted to have a go. Go ahead. Your turn.
Harry, could you mute your microphone, please? I'm getting a lot of feedback from it. Thank
And
you.
I just wanted to add that that Eddie from Tecton is on also, if we have any specific questions.
Okay. If I may, I first of all, I can't believe we're having, it seems very early or not well developed, this whole project, to be having these discussions, to be having them when people have 50%, new mayor's poll came out, 50% of the people in this country have lost their jobs, lost income, don't know when they're going to get another paycheck, don't know when or if any unemployment is going to come through. And we're talking about $1.3 million to renovate a bathroom. And
Mark,
we don't even know exactly what we're doing.
Mark, with all due respect, I don't think that's a fair statement. This has been going on, this has been tabled for years and years. And we've been working on this since I got on the
Joy,
staff.
with all due respect, you came for $605,000 during budget season, years now into the process. And a month later, 2 months later, you're telling us it's actually 1.3 million. That tells me we are not far enough along in this process to be set in stone.
I believe that Glenn said that we need to work as partners and to come up with, is this a project that's supported and when you want to push through and we figure out a solution that how to do that.
So everyone, we all panicked last meeting when we were talked about losing accreditation because of this. So I have your document from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. It's a great document, and I appreciate everything the school has done to get accreditation and keep it. But when I read Standard 7 Indicator 5, however, heating and air conditioning is uneven across the school. Currently, the building is not on one system, which causes a host of problems, and the main system is outdated and inadequate. The school cannot regulate the temperature in the building, which results in a significant variance of temperature and is neither conducive to learning nor cost effective. The main heating system is difficult to maintain and expensive to run. Furthermore, students have needed to leave class and see the nurse because they did not feel well as a result of the excessive heat. In warmer months, the gym floor, which is wood, forms a layer of condensation and becomes slippery and unsafe to use. Throughout the year, the supply closet located in the gym cannot be used because it's so hot, condensation develops and deteriorates the equipment. And we're worried about the locker room before we're worried about kids going to the nurse because of heat. Then it goes on to say, this is the portion it says needs to be done to maintain accreditation for the locker room. This is what it says. The boys' locker room is another area of significant need, particularly since the building is used as a shelter by the community during an emergency. The showers are completely inoperable and are currently used for storage. Furthermore, there are holes and many patches in the ceiling. Storage is outdated and some lockers are in need of repair. That's what during this time, we're talking about spending $1.3 million. I haven't seen one proposal that only recommended doing the stuff that they say we need to do to maintain accreditation. It continues to say, that's the only paragraph it has about the bathroom in the locker room. Then it continues, the bathrooms throughout the building are in disrepair. Students have reported discomfort in using them. For example, only one stall in the third floor girls' bathroom locks and has a working toilet. Furthermore, no one wants to use it because there's a very wide gap in the door. Additionally, most students are willing to walk out of their way to go to one of the 2 maintained water fountains in the building because they found the other water fountains unsanitary. And we're talking about the locker room, expanding weight rooms and stuff. Money's not around. And that's what we're worried about. Now, the slide that you sent me and Steve after the last meeting that is conveniently changed, this is it. When you send it to me, and I'll read it, this was the 3rd slide. Existing conditions, water fill station. The room has not been cleaned all year. Chemicals are still present, though they have been requested to be removed repeatedly over the last 5 years. 5 years, remove chemicals from the locker room where they fill water bottles. We can't manage to do that. The next slide, there's no physical separation between home and visitor locker rooms. You can see it in the picture, the door frame, nor between the locker room and the team room during the school day. The request to replace the door has been made repeatedly. These are $200, $300 fixes to help maintain accreditation that have been asked for repeatedly. We can't do that. We can't maintain that. And you want $1.3 million for a new facility that goes way above and beyond what they're asking for during accreditation. And we're not addressing, my biggest problem, we're not addressing the other problems in the building. Kids going to the nurse because they're getting almost heat stroke, and we're not addressing that.
I don't think it's fair to say that we're not addressing that just because we haven't brought those requests specifically to the Board of Finance. We have mechanisms to address those concerns, and I believe we do that. Where there are large capital issues, yes, we come to the Board of Finance with those issues.
What are you doing to address the heating system? Because they're saying it's a building-wide situation. I got to imagine that's a large capital improvement.
Yeah, wasn't there, Joy, wasn't there an HVAC improvement at the high school last year?
Yes, that project I think is complete now. I'd have to look back in my.
They say that that is for the auditorium.
That was for the auditorium, yeah.
Yeah, this is talking about school-wide.
Hey, Mark,
Yes, Paul.
it's Paul Checo. Again, we can debate it here. I can talk about the heating issues in the past and how we got to this point. We can talk about it here. We can talk about it offline, whatever you prefer. But if
I know they're there.
if I can help you understand how we got to where we are, I think it would be helpful for us to have that conversation. And I think it's probably too lengthy and a little too technical to have right now.
You and I can have that offline. My point is,
Okay.
there are many, many items addressed for accreditation in the manual about accreditation. And that seems far more.
On your one point, the new building management system is planned by Dan Colwell. Will help maintain the cooling and heating. That's happening, yes. Our new building management system that's underway.
Glenn,
I think, hold on, my turn here, hold on. I think to address all of this, and in fairness to Rosa and in fairness to the Board of Ed, that we're reading from a report that we don't know what's being addressed and not being addressed. I think it'd be better off at this point to take that accreditation report, list the items that are required to keep the accreditation or that were brought up as concerns of the accreditation, and let's work a group together to figure it out. Let's get Paul, Mark, and whoever, Dan Caldwell, and some of the Board of Ed members in there and see, because Rosa's saying some of these are being addressed. It's just we're reading the report. We don't know what is being addressed.
Exactly. And in all fairness, and I really do appreciate willingness to cooperate, and, ultimately the school are now an asset, but little things like fixing water stations and things like that, we address those on a yearly basis. That's part of the maintenance of the building. So when we find, when there are findings that come out in a report like this, you as a Board of Finance don't always see that, but that is the Board of Ed's job to prioritize and address those concerns.
Rosa, there's chemicals in the water fill station that have been repeatedly requested to be removed over the last 5 years. I offered to come do it for free. I'm licensed and insured to do it. And they didn't even take me up on that. To me, water fill station chemicals, that's a life safety issue.
But Mark, I think this addresses, Mark, hold on. I think though, again, what Steve said, don't get upset, stay with us here. I think this is what Steve said is we as a town have neglected some of these buildings. So it falls on a little bit of all of us in an own way. And if we have solutions, let's bring each part of us. Let's put you in there with Paul. And like I say, and let's figure out a plan. Let's get it together here. There's elements that need to be fixed. Between all of you, I got to assume the expertise, the knowledge, and the work ethics would figure out a way to best do this for the town, working with the Board of Ed to alleviate some of the dollar amounts, and let's move it forward. I mean, if there's problems, we need to address them. It's how we address them with the expertise and the knowledge, which you have. You
That
have
was
that
my
knowledge.
first point, is I don't see how this is far enough along for a Board of Finance during a crisis to approve $1.3 million. I just don't see, and I agree fully with Paul. If we're going to do it, just do it. But I would add, you have to do it right. We
I
can't
would
do it
agree
just
with
to
you.
do it.
Can I jump in? I would agree with both Glenn and Mark on this. I think this is something that we take off to the side. And we need to review this very, very carefully, get Paul and his team on the NBC involved, because this is $1.3 million and we need it done right. Now, addressing the other issues, the water fountains and stuff. Okay, maybe that needs to be done too, but we're going a little far afield here right now. The question now is, I thought this Board of Finance meeting was simply to work on the budget we are going to have for next year. Driving down to the level of detail we are right now with one project is not, I think, what we should do. I think we make a commitment to the NEASG that we are going to fix this, we are going to make it right, and then we move forward. But right now, we can't do that, guys. We can't do it. We need Mark in there. We need Paul Checo. We need Tecton. We need everyone in there working on this to get the right answer for the boys' bathroom. And I don't think we're going to be able to make that decision tonight.
No, it's not. Steve, you're right. Absolutely correct. This was, again, what are we looking at? Because now we have 300,000 that we put out there this year in the current year budget.
Right.
What does that 300,000 get us right now? Is it worth spending right now? Is it worth bonding right now? Or is it worth putting off, taking it out of the budget right now and saying, hey, we're going to commit to doing this. We're going to put forth the team and we're going to look at it. That's why we brought this in tonight. As part of the
I agree with
discussion
you.
and
I
what
agree
will
with
come
you.
out.
I don't think we should have gotten into the detail. Eddie's on the phone. Eddie, what would it cost us to get a full design of, and Paul, you jump in here too, a full design of what it would take to correct the boys' bathroom? I mean, a final, this is what we did, just like we did with the new school. This is what we believe it will cost.
Hey, Eddie, I'm going to ask Steve Dunn's question a different way. Could Tecton put together a proposal through bidding for what it would cost to do this project?
Good idea.
So this way, when we come back to revisit this, we have a couple of things. We'll have an actual cost of construction. So when we come to the Board of Finance, we come to the voters of the town of Brookfield, we have an actual scope and an actual cost from a contractor to do the work.
What is the cost to get that done?
That's what I just asked Eddie for the proposal for.
That's it.
But usually, a good measure would be take around 8% of the cost of construction for A&E fees.
All right.
Glenn, can I make a quick comment? This is Harry.
Yeah.
I doubt whether there's anyone on this call that is any more in favor of or a bigger proponent to getting this boys' locker room completed. It's not renovating a bathroom. It's a complete overhaul of that whole part of the building. That being said, while on the Board of Ed, it took me 10 years to get the gym floor finished. But this is, again, uncharted waters where we are right now. And I agree that this is not the year, as big of a proponent, supporter of this that I am. This is not the year to take this on, not with the crisis that we're in. And we're trying to be as frugal with the money that we have. So I'm just wanted to put this out because I am a huge supporter of this, but I agree with Mark that this just is not the year to do it. This is one can we need to kick a little further down the road.
Harry, I agree with you, but we need to show to the NEASG that we're making steps. If we can put a certain amount of money aside to actually do a full design, they'll be fine with that, I think.
I understand. I find it hard to believe that they are going to negate our accreditation
Dan,
Plan
Dan,
for
I agree.
plan.
Dan, all right. I think we got it now. I think Dan's right, and I think Steve was right. And Terry, I appreciate it.
Okay,
I think we got to move on at this point. I think we've heard it. We've listened to the presentation. It now becomes part of our capital discussion going down the road, further down the road. And I think, Steve, your input's going to be big. Paul, yours as well. But I think we've heard it now. We understand it a little bit better. We have a basic idea of the costs, even though they could go up. So I think we have enough to make a decision for this process.
I agree, but Dan DeVoris wanted to make a comment. Dan, what was your comment? You wanted?
So thank you. My question was the $300,000 that we currently have in the capital budget. Is that designed to be used for plans? Is that designed to be used for repairs, or is that designed to be used for a reserve for future? That's my question.
When we talked about it, Dan, and my recollection of it was that was for refining the design and fixing the showers to make them useful, to get us to a point where some of the facility was useful. And Steve, am I correct? That's what we talked about.
That's what that's my remembrance.
Right. So now that second part is something we shouldn't be considering, because that would be a temporary fix before relocating them or something. So all we should be thinking about is the cost of a plan for this current budget season.
That is what I would support, Dan. I don't want to spend $50,000 or $100,000 getting showers and toilets working, and then we're going to rip them out in a year.
Right.
Agreed.
Paul asked a great question of, I don't remember who from Tecton is on. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. But to try to get us a cost of what that would be to get the plan.
About 8%, that's $104,000.
Yeah.
Is that correct, Eddie?
Yeah, that's a decent placeholder. We'd have to take a look at it. My suspicion is that it probably wouldn't need to be quite that high. I assume it would probably be under $100,000, but yeah, we could put together a proposal. To the best of my knowledge, I thought that we already had prepared a proposal for the completion of the job. So I can take a look at what we did there. I know the scope has changed, obviously somewhat, so we may need to refine that proposal, but I believe we had done that before.
Eddie, we already have plans, if I heard you correctly, that we could send out to get bids. Rough. Is that right or no?
I would imagine not a bid, no, but I mean, I think if you had, a contractor that you had a good relationship with, you could give them what we have here and they could put together a price that might be a little more accurate than what we put together.
I don't think that helps us at any.
Right, Eddie?
Yeah, I don't know that's terribly helpful, but I'm just answering the question.
Understood. I'm just giving a little clarification.
Yep.
All right. I actually think we have enough right now to chew on, to be honest with you. Let's move on to the budget process here, and we'll rethink this and send out questions as we have them to Joy, who can distribute them to the people and give us back feedback. I mean, is everybody okay with that?
I'm fine with that. I just want to thank Eddie and Joy and Rosa getting on here for this.
And Paul, don't forget Paul. Don't leave Paul out.
Oh,
Steve
no,
always forgets Paul.
That's true.
I'd like to thank Joy and Paul and Rosa and Eddie also. Yes, thank you.
And again, thanks to the Board of Finance for, hearing us this evening. I know it's a tough season.
Thank you. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's
Thanks,
move
everyone.
on to Steve. Why don't you bring us into the next aspect of where we stand and where we're gonna go?
Okay, so Marcia and I and our finance team have been working for the last week primarily on making sure we have good numbers for this budget upcoming. There are some changes. There are downs, there are ups, there are things that we've considered going out 3 or 4 years. And what I'd like to do, Marcia made the presentation to me today. We spent 2 hours going over it. And I'd like to turn this over to Marcia because she has the numbers and she's really good at this. So Marcia, can you take over?
I can. Dan, can you let me share the screen?
Yep, you should have access already.
And I'll mute myself.
I'm looking. I don't see what I normally see where I can share the screen. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Yep. I think this is my only screen. And share.
So if I can jump in while Marcia's looking, we've looked at every single expense line and every single revenue line from the town side and in depth. Now, a lot of the things that we're going to talk to you about tonight are guesses, and we're going to give you the worst case scenario, and then we need to make a decision where to move forward. Go ahead, Marcia.
All right, and we've also spent time with different seminars, the big takeaway is this whole budget season is an iterative process that nobody has the answers right now. And so we're just trying to create a baseline of where to start based and look at, we all had different ideas. We want to work this in, we want to work in the potential of using fund balance. We want to work in, ups and downs and Ricky's contingency plan. And so that's what we've tried to do. And we're doing it on the fly so that the worksheet that we gave you last night to look at the bones of it, we filled some out today we want to talk about. But we're very much, it's changing day to day. It's not, I have to give some cautions on the worksheet that we haven't done a lot of testing on it, that we're just trying to get it together. That so any comments are greatly appreciated.
Yes, and can I jump in just a little, Marcia? These are, as Marcia said, very fluid numbers. Even today, we got an update on an expense that we're having. So you have to bear with us. We're trying to give you the most up-to-date numbers we have. They may change, and we're going to tell you that. There are numbers who have changed. The taxes we're collecting has slowed down. You know what? I'm glad we looked at that really in depth, and Glenn asked us to do that. And after doing a deep review, man, they're slowing down a little more than we thought they were going to. So, Marcia, go ahead.
All right, so the first step that we want to do, we need to look at revenues, not only next year, but this year. And because we're just trying to do this in a tight timeline, what we did was we took just total revenues. We don't really care so much if it's allocated to property taxes, back taxes, but this is the biggest concern of all of them, that we're trying to predict what effect COVID has had on our revenue, just so we can predict what might happen in the future as what should we be considering. And so if you look at the collections that we had in March and April, you can see that they're different than the 2019, substantially different than the 2019. In April, I prepared this yesterday, April or the day before, it was posted to the 26th, so we do have a few extra days there that we could collect. And so when we looked at this and any of the revenues, that here's what we collected in 19. This was very similar to what we collected in prior years, month over month. So we have a decrease of about 40% in March. We had a decrease here. And we're not gonna, if we assume that these are gonna have the same decrease as March and April, we're not gonna have a lot of revenue at the end of the year, month over month based on the prior months. However, that I did talk to the tax collector to say, you know, let's get an understanding of that. What is it, and this doesn't account for all of the decrease. February had a decrease too, and let me just go to the next page. We look at the graph of where we stand, and you can see that we were doing all right, and then we fell behind. A few things that we're going to do as a result of this. One is she posts the revenue based on the due date. So the revenue for February, or for January, we have the tax collections February 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in February, because that's when they were collected. And so that kind of masks that February was a bad month for finance to look at. So we're going to change that, and we're going to post them in the same month that she posts them, just based on due dates, and they'll be a little bit off, but that'll help us some. And we're also going to ask her to do some of this reporting. She does do a monthly report to look at collections and where the collections stand, and provide information for balancing, but we need to ramp up the budget versus actual in that reporting. So what happened? Well, in the spring, there is, she sends out demand letters with a threat that she's going to go to a tax sale. And this spring, there's an executive order that she can't send those out. So our accounts receivable were at 810,000 at June 30th of 19, and are now at 1.7 million. Those demand letters that she would be sending out on the back taxes would have been 720,000. And many pay after that demand letter, but they wait for that demand letter threatening a tax sale. That's been her experience. So she couldn't send those out because of the executive order stopped any foreclosure proceedings. Are they going to, so we have no history on will they pay in May or June. It could break the cycle, and they could pay in May and June. She did send out the lien notices, that she's required to send out lien notices. Some people have corresponded that how rude that is, that it's in this time, but it is required that if we want to perfect our lien, we have to do that. So she sent those out. She's got some calls coming in that might bring in some of these big chunks of money. But right now, we're thinking our worst case scenario is we're way under revenue. One other point that we should make is that the way that it works on revenue, I've calculated it here with May and June. Maybe we should, refine it some, because revenue under the modified accrual basis, you pick up the next 60 days of revenue. So we would pick up July and August on a cash basis for the next 60 days of revenue, and subtract out the first 60 days of revenue. So there could be some additional fluctuations there. But that is, that's the property taxes. That's the only thing that's really new on the schedule of revenue. The second part that we look at are licenses and permits, that we knew that we would be down on licenses and permits on our report on the 29th, the February 29th. We had that included in there, that and it hasn't changed much. Intergovernmental revenues, It's pretty much the same. I think we're $200 different than what we thought in February 29th. Some good news is the Town Aid Road grant money. We got notification today that it's coming in. It was due July and January and got held up with the state's bond process. But we got notice today, which means we'll see it in the bank account tomorrow. We got the second half of the education cost sharing today. LOSIP is out there. We have to, it was just allocated in April. And in order to get that money, we have to spend it after it's allocated. So now we can spend it and then we'll do the paperwork to get reimbursed. And then the grants for municipal projects, Steve sent that certification out today, the first day that it came out. But it's not going to speed up when we get it. That's supposed to be in June that we get that. Charges for services, that it's down a little bit. That we know that we're not doing, we had classes in there for the seniors. We have conveyance taxes. We have recording fees. They're down. They seem to be down maybe 20% on average. So that we have accounted for that. We can't do any wetlands or blight fines right now, as I understand it, with all these executive orders, or wouldn't do them. Interest income is down. We're made about 20,000. We're at 65 basis points. We made that in the last month. We project that we make that in the next few months. Rents are up because we bought the Silvermine property, and this is just sale of assets and other small things. So our revenue for this year is going to be down. But it also, I think, gives us a basis to look at for next year's revenue. When we look at next year's revenue, one of the things that we want to look at, now we've filled this out to try and address all the different things that and ideas that have come up, but we can certainly change them. We can certainly, we've tried to make it the worst case scenario. And again, an iterative process that maybe next week we know more and it's, you know, we're more positive that, but even after this budget is passed, under Ricky's contingency idea, we take that and should be looking at the budget for transferring, if needed, money out to contingency a little bit at a time, maybe every 2 months, maybe every quarter. But we were, for next year, we were thinking, we had done a process where we did this number of the collection rate was always based on the 5-year average. The 5-year average is 99.07. We may want to consider dropping that of who pays their current year taxes in that current year. Right now,
yeah. Marcia, I have a question on that. Can you go back to the PDF for a second? Page 2.
yes,
The second page.
yes,
The collection rate, 5-year, 6-year history.
yes,
It's actually a 6-year downward trend. So
that is,
well,
yes, that's
and
true.
that's very trouble. So this is not a 1-year thing. It's not a COVID thing necessarily. It's a 6-year downward trend. And 5-year average might not be appropriate. And I question why that is and what we can do about it, both during and post COVID, because this is troubling.
I agree that the worst year was this year, the second worst was last year, and the third worst was the year before.
Right.
So Dan, are you suggesting? we
Post-COVID,
use
you have a
like
couple of
3-year
tax sales.
average? Wait, one at a time. Are you
Sorry.
suggesting maybe we look at it at a 3-year average?
I am.
Okay.
I am. And then how do we remediate it once we get through the crisis to get back to the 99 and change as opposed to the 98.5 and falling?
Yeah, that's a good question. The final answer though is we collect virtually 99.9% of our taxes. It may take us 5 years to do it, but we do it. But
That
you
doesn't help
raise
us
a
from a
good
budget,
point.
right. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay. I was going to say that from a cash standpoint and a responsibility standpoint, that's right. That's great. But from a budgeting standpoint, it doesn't help.
Yep, and when we look at the back taxes that Glenn asked me this today, so I have the percentages in my head, that our current, at the end of the current year, it's the current year that makes up 68% of the back taxes. The 1 year back makes up 19% and then 6%. So the bulk of it is collected within 2 years. That, but anyway, but this is again a decision point that we should look at, that we should work with. You know, even instead of having a mechanical thing like the average of 5 years or the average of 3 years, maybe just look at it closer every year and have it a little less objective and a little more subjective.
Marcia, if I may, maybe I missed it. Steve said we end up collecting about 99.9, which is great. And you said we collect that typically most of that within 2 years. So there should be $700,000 coming in from previous years. Is there a line of previous years' taxes that come in late with penalties?
Yes.
Well, can I jump in? Can I jump in, Marcia? You know, over the last 2 years, 3 years, we have much more aggressively pursued past taxes with the sheriff and putting liens and doing things like that. And you remember last year we said, okay, we got this big bump in collections. We're not going to get that anymore. We are going to go through the same process. So that's a good question mark.
I don't remember that because I wasn't on the Board of Finance last year. So we got a big bump. So at some point in the year, you came to the Board of Finance with some big bump.
Yes.
And we did something with
Right.
that money.
Yes, they actually had a marshal go out, I believe, and help
Yes.
out the cause. So they did Steve's right, they did aggressively, but
No,
that's where,
that's great. What did we do with the money?
It's all into the general fund. It was part, was part of the general fund, fund balance, the
Yeah, we didn't
increase.
just spend it. It went into the general fund. I think that's the
Correct.
appropriate thing to do. Great.
Correct. And you can see that was a good lead into this slide, Mark. So the first question on, and all of this from the current year, looking at the data, even though in this one, I lumped it all together, up on page 1, the current year is the issue here. The back of the other estimates seem to be pretty good as far as that goes. And I will point out that we are balanced to the tax collector right up through March 31st. That so we're confident in these numbers. That but so I put this line in just so we can get that into the worksheet, the model, so to speak, that we're under. So that's the only place this shows up. Is the rest of the current year taxes are calculated over here on this one. The only decision point really we're making is this one. On the revenue, we have to start making decisions, and I hope this isn't a challenge to this COVID, but I think we've gone with the worst case scenario that if we look at this other types of revenue, this is what you're looking at, Mark, is the prior year tax.
Can I jump in here? Can I just, we are looking at what we would call the worst possible situation we can be in. And so everything you're seeing from now on is going to be worst case scenario. We don't think this will happen, but this is the worst that we have to prepare for. Am I right, Marcia?
Yes. But again, that's not a challenge for.
I don't see how we call that the worst case scenario. I'm sorry. If something comes up and things stay shut down for 2 more months, or they announce it's shut down till September, I guarantee you that number will increase sharply. And for anybody who thinks that we should be raising taxes right now to look at the amount of dollars that are already people are trying to save every penny they can. Now, a question I have, Marcia, two questions. One is, you're not going to answer right now, but how did we just find out about this now? Why didn't we know February, early March with some serious red flags? But more importantly, do we have a feeling yet? Is this, 300 households not paying? Is this 2 houses and 2 businesses not paying? What's the take on who's not paying this?
The take is that it's pretty much the same people year over year. That she gave me the list of what made up the 700,000, and it's a lot of people with $40,000 to $80,000 amounts. There's some that are repeat offenders on the list, and that maybe the property is with an attorney, and it takes this threat for the attorney to pay the taxes. There's some that talk about, well, they're putting their house up for sale.
And they need to get out. This is, Mark, this is not changed from the past few years. It might in the next year if this continues. But what we have to do is simply work on what we know. And we know that most people will do anything to keep their houses. We know that 30% of our revenue is from houses who have mortgages. And the mortgage companies are going to pay the taxes. There's no doubt about that.
No doubt. And that's on 30% of the houses.
The commercial, which is 15 to 20% of our business, BJ's, Costco's are going to pay their taxes. So we've looked at all of this and we're trying to get the best answer we think you guys need.
So we're not yet. We're not talking about the, I'm sorry, we're not talking about the, the 95% of the house. We're between, it's the difference between 99.5 and 98.5 or lower. So we're not talking about all those, but those small percentages are hundreds of thousands of dollars that we need to bridge the gap on. And just, so going back to when we found this, I was, I'm looking at these trends back on page 2 of the PDF, and through February, Mark, it looks like things have jumped around, but through February, the trends were pretty much on track with what they've always been. It's starting in March and April that it started.
No, it's shown there in March and April because the bills didn't go out till February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So when they should have come back, we would have known. Granted, it's after reporting,
right,
but there still should have been a red flag raised up
Fair enough.
By the 15th of the month.
Fair enough.
Steve or Marcia would have seen it. Somebody should have brought it to their attention is what I'm saying.
Agree with you.
But I was going somewhere before when you said there were $40,000 to $80,000 people that owed $40,000 to $80,000. Those aren't people. That's not a residence. That's not a house in Brookfield. That's a business, correct? Businesses that would owe that much.
Not necessarily that, and I have the list. I don't want to pull it up in public here, but not necessarily, because it's not people that are just behind this year. They've got the lien notices. This is people that are behind several years, because when you're behind 10 months, you're not going to go to a tax sale. So it's several years worth of data in there.
But if we end up collecting every 2 years, 99.9% of this, most of those are not going out more than 2 or 3 years max.
Correct.
To get to $80,000, we do not have people with $25,000 tax burdens on their house, by and large, in Brookfield. So the bigger numbers would tend to be businesses. We have a very real possibility of businesses staying closed. If businesses stay closed, we may never, ever see that money.
So this is why we're talking, it's real estate. So we will see it. We'll have a lien. But that's why it needs to be an iterative process. That
we have a lien if the thing sells. If we go into a recession, the property or business may not sell for 10 or 15 or 20 or ever, depending on how bad this gets. I'm just trying to be a realist here.
Yeah. So, but that's why it's an iterative process, that we're doing our best guess today, we need to keep guessing. We need to keep looking at it. From what I understand, some states that allow it, Connecticut doesn't, they're doing a budget for just the first quarter. That they're not even doing the full year because people just don't know. And so the only way that we can do something similar is that Ricky's thing with the contingency, throwing money into a contingency so we can dole it out as we need it, if we need it. So this is the property taxes. We have prior year taxes. Those are the back.
Marcia, can I jump in real quickly to talk to Mark? Mark, regardless of whether a property goes bankrupt, regardless of whether somebody sells, regardless of what happens to a property, our tax revenue does not change. What happens is there is a lag in when we will get it. And so our revenues as a town are pretty much guaranteed. There is no way you can get out from under your real estate taxes. What can happen is, though, it will take longer to get it, to address your
And I
concerns.
said that, if you listened, I said that. I said some of these businesses may never come back into business.
That's
If
true.
we enter a recession that it looks like we're teetering on, that it may take 10 years or 20 years for that property to sell. If this country goes into a recession, that's a fact. That some places will not sell because people will not be opening businesses because there will be no business. So it would take, yes, we'll get the money eventually.
But what,
A long
hey,
time.
question
So
on
we
that
agree
point
with you.
though. Mark, question on that point though. We're assuming the business owns the building, right? In these scenarios. We don't
For an
necessarily know
$80,000
that.
tax lien, yes.
Well, it could just be a landlord and, you know, he might be paying some and not, we don't know the situation. We don't have the information. We could just speculate. And I don't think it's really the right
Well,
thing to
Marcia
do
can
right
send
now.
it to us. It's a public.
Yeah, no, yeah, and that's fine. And until we have that, I mean, I don't want to have to speculate on as to, you know, if things go deeper into a recession, you know, yeah, of course it's going to get worse, but even a flat tax rate is not going to help that, you know.
I understand that. I'm
It's
just saying.
there's going to be it's going to be a whole different bag of ball games, and that's
I
some other
understand
thing
that.
that we're going to have to do.
What I'm saying is,
Deal with what's in front of us now.
when we start saying that $572,000 is a worst case scenario, it may not. We hope it is. We hope that's the worst case scenario. It may not be. That's what I'm getting at.
Yep, that's true.
Sure.
That's true. So we have prior year taxes, we have supplemental taxes, interest, and the telephone tax payment is just money that shouldn't be affected. It's like Sprint and Verizon and things. So what we did when we look at the future years, and again, this is just us thinking out loud. We took the taxes for prior year taxes. We did want to reduce it to show that we will have less collections, but not too far because we've got a bigger accounts receivable out there. So there's more to collect, but let's assume that we're not going to make it up in 1 year. We put the 2 years out as neutral, then we start recouping it the year after. And again, all of these can be changed. This is just our thoughts right now. Supplemental taxes are based on new cars that are bought between October 1st and January 1st of the next year to catch them and prorate them in the January billings. What we did was when we went back to, we've got about 10 years of data. We went back to what was the lowest assessment for supplemental taxes. It was 2013. So we took that assessment times the current mill rate to try and figure out what might be the effect that supplemental taxes has. Back in the mill rate then, it was $460,000 or so, but the mill rate has gone up. Interest and lien fees, they have to pay that first. So we're assuming it's going to follow more or less the revenue. But then next year, that'll start picking up sooner. And then we'll start recouping more. So that's what we're thinking going forward in taxes. For licenses and permits, we have What if that is down with a 30% drop in building permits and planning and zoning permits? That there's a lot of activity, as Steve has heard down there. We're just not seeing the cash from it right now. So people are talking about it, but it's hasn't gone through to the cash side. So what if that dropped 30% for next year and 15% for the year after? And then there's two types. There's some revenue that is just lost revenue that won't come back. And then there's some that it's just a timing difference. And we're including that as a timing difference. But again, these are our thoughts, and would be great. The education cost sharing that we have extra this year because it passed before ours. So let's look at all of the things. We're assuming that there's going to be a drop, that and it's going to stay flat. That we assume 20% here because that's in the governor's budget last year, the first cut. That was what they were saying that they were going to give us. We're just thinking the state, we can't, although they want to keep us whole, that we're just worried that they don't have the money. That and then a 10% drop in each of these. We know something's going to drop. We don't know what. But again, this is all of these are based on the baseline is the original proposed 2021 budget. That so it just is flat. Once we lose state money, it's not coming back ever. The charges for services that we've got, we're just assuming a 20% drop. This is conveyance fees, recording fees, kind of to match the real estate market for 2 years. That blight fines and things, thanks to Mark, we already have them out of the budget. That and the wetlands fines. Now investment earnings is an odd one. We know it's dropping, but one of the things we talked about, and we were supposed to be getting a cash flow statement before tomorrow from the construction managers, an estimate of the big chunks of cash and when we'll need it for the school building. And we talked a bit about maybe taking that out as early as possible. Setting it aside, we'd earn a very low interest rate, but having that money in the bank will offset the loss of the other interest. If we say, oh, we're not going to take that out till 2022, we've got to adjust this figure too. So that's just something that it's still all in process.
Marcia, can I jump in here?
You can.
New Fairfield is building new schools. They're going to spend $115 million total. They decided to fund their schools because they're moving a little more quickly on renovations than we are. They just borrowed $8 million as part of the $115 million total. Their total expense is going to be to the town about 80 some odd million. They borrowed $8 million last week at a rate of 2.1%. That's unheard of in the municipal market. So John Lucas and I talked about this today, and we discussed it with Marcia and a couple of other people, and Matt Spurndle, our financial advisor. And it may pay us to borrow the full amount of the new school, which we estimate, what, about $62 million next year. If we can get a 2.25% interest rate on that, which is higher than what New Fairfield already paid for their $8 million, we could save a ton of money because our 10-year plan that we've shared with you and we've worked on together ad infinitum assumes an interest rate of somewhere between 4 and 5% for that $63 million. If we can borrow it next year at 2 or 2.25, assuming we still get a 50 basis point return on investment, so we avoid the interest rate arbitrage problem, we have a cost of those funds, at least for the next few years, of like 1.75%. That will equate to about $1.2 million a year in savings on interest alone for the new school. So that's something that John, I, Marcia, and of course we'll get you guys involved, should discuss. Should we fund it immediately? And I'd like to ask John to jump in here. And can you unmute yourself and give your opinion on this, John Lucas?
Sure. I agree. I mean, New Fairfield is a AAA rated municipality. It's a little outside the box in terms of borrowing a little earlier than the actual project is finished. But I think it's something to consider because we're definitely going to be down in investment income. And I mean, I'm open to any suggestion from anybody else on the board for input, but I definitely think it's something to consider.
And we did talk about when we are looking at that decision formally, that we would invite at least Dan into Dvorak into the conversation.
Be great.
Yeah.
If you could send
I mean,
me,
I think
send me
that's-
the work you've done, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's great outside the box thinking, Steve and Marcia and John and everybody. I don't want to chase the rate if it starts rising, but if we can get it anywhere down near where you're saying, we absolutely got to look at it.
Right.
No
Yeah,
brain.
We do. And, you know, we'll talk to Matt Smerndel, and obviously he was on last week's meeting. These guys are really, really good. And I think they would be able to tell us within 20 basis points where we will end up in the market. And remember that in really difficult times, the race is towards quality and safety. US Treasuries, government bonds, and municipalities above state bonds. Dan, do you agree?
That's not my area of expertise on the specifics, but in general, absolutely.
Yeah, they look for safety. Municipalities have to run. And if you have a AAA, we're AA2 right now, we're trying to get to AA1. There's a flight to quality. Dan, you agree? Dan Dvorak?
Absolutely. That's a common phrase. That's correct.
Okay.
And
thank you.
so this whole process that we're looking at now is, you know, trying to narrow it down. That's the whole finance, our whole philosophy is a little bit at a time, that we're trying to just start containing it. And this whole model is trying to get all the thoughts, all the pieces so that we all see them, how they're together. But that's what we're thinking right now in the revenues. Nothing much exciting on the other revenues.
Marcia,
So
can I just make one more comment?
You bet.
Sorry. Steve and John and everybody, the one thing I would caution is before we borrow money, I'd like to make sure we have all the actual approvals in place, zoning, wetlands. God forbid something falls through somewhere. I wouldn't want to borrow money and not be able to spend it on the school where we're planning on spending it.
Oh, very good point. We would need that. We had a meeting on Tuesday.
I know I was
on. You were on it, right?
Yep.
And I did not see anything from any of our actual staff that is going to stop this going forward. So that's a good point.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I have a question / statement on revenues, and maybe I don't understand it totally, but I hear everything that everybody said. Dan saying the trending is going down over the 6 years. I can see those numbers. Steve, you saying we get 99.9% of the money over time, that we have a great collection rate. What happens if our expenditures, if we're down 3 million in revenue on tax and our expenditures exceed our revenue? We now have to dip to the general fund to pay this, correct? I mean,
that's correct.
So this is a concern of putting a higher number on the estimated revenues and taking a chance on the expenditures. This almost dictates you have to drive down the expenditures, because if you can't guarantee the revenue side coming in and the trending is going down, you almost have to look at expenditures as your mechanism to maintain that safety if you're not willing to touch a general fund as a checking account. Am I missing something?
No, I don't think you are, but if we manage it properly, we won't have to do that. But you may raise a good point.
Well, so this year revenues are projected, even in not the worst case, to be down $400,000 or $500,000.
Yes.
And absent the surplus that we are enjoying, for lack of a better word, due to the shutdown, we would have had to draw from the general fund $400,000 or $500,000 to bridge that gap. If in all normalcy, that's what we would have had to do.
Yes, if we spent every penny of our budget, yes.
Okay.
And then projected next year, we have a downfall, or, we're projecting a lower percentage collection. So it almost dictates the expenditures have to follow suit. Otherwise, we're walking a fine line again.
Yeah, you can, so that's why Ricky's model is so nice, because you can always add to expenditures, but you can't subtract from necessarily from expenditures. All right. So let's look at the expenditures for the town side, and what we know right now, that this was from the March 31st statement, the draft. It was a little bit higher, but now we've divided it between operating capital and debt. So, but it totals up to that 331 report that we had a few weeks ago. Last week, we talked about the registrars and the workers' comp audit. New things that we've learned this week: Memorial Day parade is canceled. We quantified the Social Security, assuming that Parks and Rec doesn't come back until after June 30th. We've cut OPEB. We talked about that, but hadn't quantified it last week. We talked with EMS last week, and they brought us the numbers. They're having, Steve, do you want me to go through this, or did you want to handle this one?
Sorry, I was muted. Go ahead.
Okay. They're having a number of issues that the expenses they incur are offset by the billings that they generate. And their billings are down. They're down because people aren't calling the ambulance. They're down 40%. They're down because people are not calling the ambulance. They're down because if they call the ambulance, for example, they had a case of a heart attack, but the patient refused to go to the hospital, they can't bill for that. Even if they use supplies and things, they only can bill for transport. And so when they don't get transported, they can't bill.
So can I jump in a little bit here?
Yep.
This is an incredibly difficult situation in that Danbury Hospital does not want anybody coming to the hospital unless they clearly need emergency care work. So what we find is that our EMS with our EMTs, and we have 3 routes on now, are showing up at people's houses, and 2 things are happening. Either the individual who would be transported to the hospital, or the hospital itself is saying, do not transport them to us. We are not going to address them. And so they're going to continue to lose money on this for, I'm guessing, 4 to 6 months. Go ahead, Marcia.
Hold on,
Alright.
Steve.
Hold on, wait a minute now. Is this something, Steve, that you can now address with FEMA? Because this is a cost that's not on our end, that is a direct to COVID, because these hospitals aren't accepting these people. Can we bill this out to FEMA and say, hey, this is a COVID thing that we can't obtain these costs? If the hospital declines the patient, it's at no fault of the town. So why can't we put that on the FEMA tab?
We can. There's absolutely the possibility of doing that, but we have to fund it up front. And we
Yes.
get paid 16 to 20. Now, remember, this is a 50. Okay, let's back up. In the macro burst, it took us almost 2 years to get the funding for all the expenses we had incurred. That only affected 5 counties in Connecticut. We're talking about a 50-state FEMA emergency management announcement.
Point
So
well taken. Point well
we're
taken. Thank you.
talking about 4 or 5 years is my guess.
Point well taken.
Right? So yes, the answer is yes, but we have to deal with the next 2 years on a day-to-day cash flow basis.
Yep. Point taken.
Good.
It'll be well
Thank
past my time on the board, so point well taken.
No, you're sticking around.
So
I have
I
a quick
did-
question. Sorry, I'm probably just simplifying the problem with a really dumb solution, but is there something restricting the ambulances from taking them to New Milford Hospital?
No, the New Milford Hospital is part of the Danbury New Vance network. It doesn't matter where they go.
They're not taking
But
them anywhere.
I don't. Anytime I go by there, I don't see the SWAT teams and the COVID tents.
No,
in
you
New
don't,
Milford.
because it's Danbury Hospital. New Milford Hospital is an extension of Danbury Hospital, which is part of now the New Vance health organization. It doesn't matter where you take them. If you do not put them in the ambulance, we do not get paid. That's crazy. We have gone into situations, and I'm not going to get into details, where we have spent $1,400 on medication, EMTs, paraphernalia services for a person, and they have stayed home. We do not get reimbursed unless we put that person in an ambulance and carry them to the hospital.
Where
It's
does that
crazy.
policy come
Are
from?
people refusing to go to New Milford Hospital where there's no COVID testing being
People
done?
are refusing to go to any hospital. It
Okay.
doesn't matter.
Okay, but New Milford Hospital shouldn't be refusing patients.
They're not. No. The hospitals aren't refusing patients. But what they are directing our EMTs, paramedics, is that this person is stable. Do not bring them to the hospital, because it's more dangerous to take them to the hospital than to leave them where they are and have their personal physician treat them. What the net to the town is, and we can't manage how the EMS works, and they do a really good job. The net to the town is, and to our EMS is, what would normally be a trip to the hospital is no longer available. And that's the only way we get paid. It's stupid.
Is that our policy? Is that our policy that we can't get paid unless we bring them to the hospital, or?
It's state and national policy. Like I'll just be personal. Today I had a visit, which I do with my personal physician, telehealth, right? We discuss my medical, all that, blah, 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 blah. You know what? She gets paid for that. If our ambulances show up to someone's house and they don't, it doesn't matter. 6 guys could show up. Somebody's in a complete cardiac arrest. We got the thumper. We got everything going, and we're spending thousands of dollars on medical, drugs, and everything. If we don't transport them to the hospital, guess what? We get paid nothing. That system is wrong. We have to fix that in the future, but that's right now what it is. So 40%, our billings for EMS are down 40%. A lot of it is people saying, I'm not going to the hospital. And a fair bit of it is, hey, less people call.
All right,
And
let's go on
with
here,
res-
Marcia. Let's get to the bottom of this.
I'm
page.
sorry, I dragged
It's all
that
good.
out.
You're right, Steve. You're right. Everything's good.
With respect to that, we will try to get reimbursed for that, but it's really opportunity cost that we're talking about, because the supplies would be down below. So I did not put that in the potential reimbursement. But we certainly are going to try, but we're not going to count on it. That is offset almost exactly by 2 grants that they have received that One we just heard about 4 o'clock, and the other one that they got a stimulus check for $19,000. So that revenue is offset. They've got increased personnel that they're trying to keep them sequestered, and so far they've been very lucky that everyone's been healthy. But we've talked about the increased personnel before, increased supplies, their PPE, they don't reuse PPE, so that is included in here. These are the totals, and previously, when we were looking at that March 31st report, we had $64,000 in there. So I just wanted to show the totals here, but the net effect is it's $25,000 more than it was before. And then I put in the potential FEMA for just these two at 75%. Those are the new things that we've quantified this week. We still have some things that are open, some items that are still open that we need to quantify. That when we reopen town hall, we're going to need the term is just horrible, sneeze guards and things that
Can I jump in here? Can
Yep.
I jump in here, Marcia? There's no doubt that we're gonna have to reopen town hall. We have to get back to business just like everybody else. But we have to protect both our residents and our employees. And we have open counters now. We have people can just walk in, walk around and do whatever they want. And we're gonna have to change that. We're gonna have to put in full guards. As Marcia said, it's sneeze guards, and develop a process that so people can come in and be confident that they are being treated fairly and safely. And we have every single counter in the downstairs to look at: land use, fire marshal, assessor, tax collector. And we're gonna have to rethink this whole thing, and that's gonna be an expense.
and the
But-
library and Parks and Rec.
And the library, I don't know what we're gonna do. Parks and Rec is a little bit easier, I think, but it's gonna be an expense.
So they've got someone coming in tomorrow to look at that. They're working on getting quotes and ideas. Emergency Operations Center, that's stuff that supplies that PPE and masks when the employees come back. As I understand the governor, that we're going to need to have masks. We may need to have gloves. The additional cleaning that's still open. Whether they're this year or next year is also open on what the timing is. The union contract for the police that, and I should have put this in next year, that is starts July 1st. These two are still in negotiation right now. Police overtime, we should have some savings, but we lose all that savings if someone gets sick. We talked about that last week. Unemployment, last week we had talked about the unemployment benefits. We did some research on that because they're extending it 13 weeks. As far as we can tell, that the federal government is paying for that because we reimburse unemployment dollar per dollar. But we've got more and more people, a lot of our part-time help for Parks and Rec instructors, several of them have lost their full-time positions. So we're part of the base pay. So we have, some are just a few dollars here and there, but we've got, we're getting a growing list of people that will be responsible for some of the unemployment. So that's this year. Next year, we've got some things we talked about last week, and then the new estimates that if we skip the assessor audits for 1 year, that we could save some money there. Workers' comp, we just got a letter in today or yesterday, the 27th, 2 days ago, that that Kerma has decided that they're not going to raise our workers' comp. It was going to go up 3%. Now it's not going up. That affects us, WPCA and Board of Ed, but this is our portion. The library, we talked to them. We had had a payroll contingency in there, and just cutting that back. This isn't the year to add that. The Art Commission, that they have a film festival in May. They're obviously not having that. So next year it may double up, and they'll have one in the fall and one in the spring. We still, health and dental, the health, there's not going to be any savings. That they are taking the 6.5% increase and condensing it into 9 months. We haven't, it's a negligible amount that's going to be changing. But the dental is through the same plan, and it's in the same line item, and they haven't, we're still working on estimates there. There's some rumor it's not going to go up, but we don't want to be fooled by that rumor that it's not going to go up until October, like the health insurance did. So that's still something that's on the open list. That we have education. We haven't been able to get anything from education as far as other than from Rosa. Maybe she'll have some more information later. That they had an estimate that we talked about before, savings in the financial statements without with schools coming back on May 20th of 91,000. There was some talk about taking 89,000 of one-time costs from next year and paying them this year. So there they are being paid this year and saved next year. They were going to take an additional 30,000 of monitors and move that to the cafeteria fund. And our question, this is in red because it's just us questioning, could we reclassify some of that this year as well, the monitors that we've paid for year end 20. So they have not committed to that. That's why it's in red. But other than that, we don't have any additional information from the Board of Ed. I think they're meeting on the 6th to talk about
I
that.
think Rosa actually can address some of that tonight, Marcia. So it might be a good time, Rosa.
Yep, no, that's true. I don't know about the monitors. I don't think you are allowed to reimburse yourself from that account, but everything else seems accurate. So I do have a couple other updates I can share, but I'll let you finish and then get to those.
Okay. So this, we would just be doing a journal entry to reclassify that. And we do that all the time with different expenses. There's no budget that we would give to them. So I can't see why we couldn't. So we should just take that back and check. That we had Board of Ed, we had some money for Board of Ed retirement. The state had threatened that we were going to have to pay that at the time we did our budget, that we didn't have to pay it. Some went to a kindergarten teacher. That's what's left. Nothing else is going to happen there. And we have some capital outlay that if we look at the capital outlay, let me freeze this pane here. If we look at the capital outlay, we had identified some savings in the two, this is just the net savings from projects. And we want to take this savings, I think, is, and again, it's all up for discussion. We take that savings and we apply it to some of the cash paid for paving. So that would reduce it'd be a savings in the general fund. And just reallocating that, that we could do more things that were in the bonded project and save them over here. And I was just, this is really more of an example that of what we could do as an option, that and say, okay, we're going to bond this $50,000 cost and just offset from one to the other. And then in total, and this is what you can see it on the front screen, we had talked about moving money, if we had extra money this year, throwing it into capital non-recurring and then moving it back out next year just as a vehicle. So it doesn't look like we're about budgeting for a deficit. But again, that's something we'll see on the front screen. The debt that we talk about, that we knew we had some savings. We had about $54,000 of savings, and we reclassified some for transfers. So there's 18,000 of savings from that March 31st report, and probably nothing happening with the debt next year. But then down here, we're just trying to guess of what the debt expenditures would be in year 22. And this is how we built out our guess, that right now, this is what we have in bond anticipation notes. Some of it were 20 years, some were 10 years. So I just picked 17 and a half years as the net term to come up with the payment. The interest rate I put in at 2.5%. This is from the model of how much we would be spending in principal for each of the years put in here. So all of this is just trying to guess is essentially what it is. This is the new school. We wouldn't pay interest the first year, that but we wouldn't pay principal the first year, but we pay interest. We would want to push the payments out as far as we can, because it's 2027 that the costs really drop on what we're currently paying for debt service. So every year it gets a little bit more and more debt in there as we go through. And these figures are what's changing. That's coming from the model. That contingency, that we're going to have a savings this year in contingency. It's part of that whole process. We're going to have to start doing formal transfers, but from that March financial statements, this is that thing that Ricky talked about, moving part of the prior year surplus to here. This is the costs, all the costs we just talked about, EMS. This is what the costs would be next year. They add up to 270,000. Again, if the revenue was down the same as it's been for the last month for all of next year, that we've got some estimates still open. Emergency Operations Center, social services, are they going to need part-time help for carrying some of this workload with the people? We talked about that last week. Both the social services processing stuff and the food bank, which is now service the volunteers, older volunteers doing that, unemployment. And then Doc was saying, our health director, the last time that we had, I think it was SARS or something in 2003, that there was a vaccine and we would need to pay for the vaccine, and the visiting nurses to administer the vaccine, which is what we did the last time we had the SARS health issue.
Marcia, I don't mean to interrupt you. There might be a requirement, which there was back then, that we offer vaccines to anyone who's willing to show up as a town. Doc said we vaccinated 6,000 people then. Most of the cost was covered by state and federal money, but we've got to be considerate of that and keep it in the balance.
So all of those things that we just talked about, I think, incorporate everything that we know about right now. That if there's something else that comes up tomorrow, we go in and they say, you know, oh, we might have to paint all the ceilings purple, then we'll add that to the list. That we have some transfers in here that, again, trying to incorporate what we talked about. Oops, that's not what I want here. Trying to incorporate what we talked about. There's extra money in the student activity funds that need to go, would come out of there and go into the general fund. This non-lapsing, if you are really intending to take that and setting up a new fund, that now would be the time to take some of that surplus to move that over. So that's what this is. This is the capital non-recurring money, the extra money going over to the general fund. And then later it drops into the contingency. When I look at the summary, which we'll look at in a minute, when I first looked at it before we populated this, I said, wait a minute, that 2022 had a big jump, a bigger jump than what I was expecting. Why is that? And the reason is that the biggest of the reasons was that we were expecting 2021's taxes to go up higher to cover $1 million of bond interest on, because we thought we would be taking money out by now to cover construction and things for the school for $1 million. We didn't do that. So instead of having two somewhat equal steps from 21 to 20, from 20 to 21 and 21 to 22, we have a smaller step or no step in 21 and a bigger step in 22. But this, we can compare everything we do to where does that stand against the model. All the numbers move over here automatically and into the as of now column. And then this is the number from the model in case you like me like to say what's going on. So then we get to the summary, and this is just pulling everything together, that all of the stuff that we talked about. Here is our original. Here's the changes in the net revenue, the changes in the expenditures for this is all this year. Those transfers, 77 out to non-lapsing, 52 in from student activity. Moving the profit over to the, not profit, but the excess revenue over expenditures over to CNR so that we can move it later or treat it however we're going to treat it later. That in this case, we're going to take, in this example, that we would take 250 of that to offset capital. And we would, the rest we would transfer in for part of our contingency. And you can see that the numbers aren't pretty, that when we take all that revenue out, we take some out of ours. We haven't taken any, the Board of Ed still has a 5% increase. That's 75% of our expenses. Whatever they decide to do is going to make a huge difference on this. But this gives us something to look at, something to work with, something to document what decisions we're making, how this might affect future years, that and the increases there, that if we wanted to spread some of this out, we go right down through 2014. And when we didn't know the numbers, we used the numbers from the model. Thank goodness we have a model that we're not shooting in the dark. So any questions on any of that? Anything you want added, subtracted, changed?
Go ahead, the field's open.
There's
Hey, Marcia.
there's too much. I mean, there's too much there to. I gotta digest all of that.
Oh, absolutely.
I got this 5 o'clock this afternoon. I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
Other than to say, if we're
And-
losing revenue, we got to lose expenses. That's all there is to it. There's no way around it. We gotta lose expenses permanently. That's just that. I mean, there's no way around it. I don't know anything more than just we were throwing a curveball here in the last day. I thought we were at, we left last meeting. I thought we had the surplus that we could allocate, and I thought we had it under control where we could do something, marginal and come up with something, that was reasonable for everybody. I don't see it. We gotta This is going to be ugly, but we got to cut expenses. There's no way around it.
Dan, can I jump? Again, I
Yeah,
said it.
sure.
I think what we should do is show you a budget using the same budget that we've already approved by the Board of Finance, showing worst case and maybe best case, at least worst case. Because you have a very, very good point here that these things could get very, very ugly. And I understand that, but we as a town have a responsibility to maintain our town, to continue to keep our town running. And we may need to make guesses as to what will happen in the future. But I think we should guess those to the positive, because if we say, oh man, cut 20 positions, and then every other industry and every other group in town says, I'm not working, well, I'm going to cut everybody. We're back to 1929. We need, as a family, as a town, to stick together. We need to make sure that our people are taken care of. And I personally am not against cutting any of our staff. They're all working like really, really hard now. And so I think what we'll do, if you're agreeable as a Board of Finance, is to say, okay, here's the budget next year, given the worst case scenario, and also given what we think will probably happen. Are you okay with that?
Me personally, I love scenarios.
I do too, but I think I just missed the big picture. You just threw me a big curveball, Steve, to be honest with you. One, we started this process at 3.56 increase, which we thought was possible to pass. It was good enough to put to the voters, but still on the high side of historical budgets.
Correct.
Now we're at 4.87 with the current expenditure rate. That's a number we're looking at in front of the screen, 4.87. No way is that going to go through. Two, your logic of we have to keep every town employee employed, but the neighbors can lose 20% of their workforce doesn't add up to me when everybody's cutting staff, everybody. It's not the optimal. I don't want to do it either. Let's be clear. But the real part of this thing is, and I'm not saying to do it, is everybody's losing 20%. Boeing's laying off 16,000. Everybody's laying off thousands of people. For us to remain whole might be a pipe dream. It's a great dream. And I agree with your philosophy, but we can't say we're going to keep every town hall employee, but if we lose 500 jobs in Brookfield, at least we got the town hall people working. So I think we got to do a fine line. We can't make a generalization on that because a lot of letters we're getting are 0% increases. A lot of people are saying keep the same. And I don't know the answer, so I'm not saying the answer. But 4.87 is not the answer. I'm not even sure 3.56 is the answer. When we left last meeting, we were at 2% increase with the Ricky model, with Marcia's talking. The number was 2.09. We were at as a mill rate increase. Marcia presented $100,000 in cuts on the town side. Ricky said 57,000 would get us to 2. That dropped us below 2%. We were at a palatable point in this crisis of less than 2%, and everybody was whole. Now with this change of revenue that came in at the last moment, that puts us now at 4.87, that would never pass a town vote. Not in a million years in Brookfield are we passing a 4.87 vote in this environment. So I think Dan is right. We got to look at cuts. We got to look at what can be done. And it shouldn't be dictated by the Board of Finance, I don't think. I think that you, Marcia, Rosa, John, and Ken need to sit in a room and come up with something that gets us in that back where we're at, that 2% range, and figure it out. I mean, that's more of a realistic point of view. Over 3 isn't gonna, we can't do over 3. I don't see it. I don't feel it's right. I mean, go ahead, other members of the board can speak.
So the 4.87% is based on the 3.5 that we had, not the 2 that we got it down to.
Well, the two that we got it, yeah, the two that we got it down to was just applying all the
Surpluses.
Right,
we didn't change anything on the budgets, on the expenses.
right. So the 4.87 is not including any of those types of savings that we had
Yes,
applied.
it does.
Because
Yeah,
they're
it
gone.
does.
They're gone.
Everything.
They're
It went
gone
up.
now, Eileen. We're up at 4.87. If we pass it as in now, right now, it's 4.87.
Using
Yeah.
the surplus.
Ugh.
Eileen, it went up because
Yeah.
we cut revenue, and
Yeah,
I will be a little bit defensive on saying that's last minute, that we couldn't tell from in advance what the revenue was going to go down. So we've had just 1 month of reduced revenue that we're basing this off of, and we had to wait till the month was over. Yes, we could have gotten some of that tax stuff earlier.
Hey, Marcia, real quick, what's the net revenue loss that we're looking at?
700,000 for next year. 21, we're thinking 700,000
Not for 21, the current year.
403.
403.
So that's,
Next year's 700,000. By the way, next year's 700,000 plus the reduction in the tax collection rate. This year's
Okay.
403.
All right, so if we were to try, okay, so that 403,000, you're looking at $1.1 million total revenue loss over 2 years. I'm not sure how that gets us to 4.8. If we were down to almost 2% by realizing a quote unquote savings of almost $990,000, how does this get us even further above where we were at? I mean, I guess I need the math a little bit high level, because your model's confusing the hell out of me when I see it all scattered. I kind of need a high level analysis of breakdown of those numbers and how we get to that 4.8, because it just doesn't make sense to me.
I can do that. I didn't have the 2%. I may have had it, but but let me, I can do
if those numbers are factored in, we should assume that those are offsetting these losses. Or is the 403 saying no, that's us losing that 998,000 of quote unquote savings that we would have realized?
Okay, Ricky,
That's where I'm confused, because then it's a revenue loss of way more than 403,000.
Ricky, can I jump in?
Yeah,
Sure.
It's not a revenue loss, it's a revenue delayed, right?
from a budgeting standpoint, it's a
it's
revenue
a loss.
loss.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a loss.
I agree with that. So why don't we put together a budget using the one you've approved, if you agree, that shows these changes, so you can see them directly and also residents can see them. Does that make sense?
Isn't that what this is?
What's going to change? What number's going to move?
No, I'm talking about looking at the same budget we sent you
Yeah.
and changing the numbers so you see them.
I can do it. I can do a higher than what Rick is asking
Steve,
for.
I appreciate that. Don't take it wrong, but I'm trying to get in my head. What is that going to move the 4.87 down, or is the 4.87 going to stand on 4.87?
No, it's going to stay the same, but at least people can see it, so you can look at it and say,
Okay.
that doesn't make sense, or that does make sense.
Can I
I don't know if the 4.87, Steve, realistically is going to make sense, even if it makes sense in this atmosphere.
It doesn't make sense.
No, but we can show.
When is our
show how it got
presentation
there.
to the town?
Hold on. That's a worst case scenario.
Steve, I have the budget in front of me, and I just threw in a $403,000 loss on the revenue side. With the
You got to go
changes that we had.
700,000 next year, Ricky. 700,000 on future looking.
All right, but I'm talking about, okay, but we're talking about this year's budget being 4.8%, right?
No,
No,
Yeah,
next
Ricky.
year, next year.
The 400 loss of this year eats up the surplus from this year.
that we
And
were
next year
gonna-
projected is $700,000 loss. So it's a $1.1 million loss over the 2 years.
Right.
We lost Steve's surplus, which he did manage the town to get a surplus. We lost it on the revenue side, which we were gonna use to offset the mill rate. And now we got a decrease on revenue on top. You got a double dip that's hitting Steve right now.
Right.
And Steve, you're doing a great job. I'm not, and Marcia, both of you did a great job on this. I'm not
Well,
upset with you guys.
It's a double dip. You're losing revenue and you didn't recoup the surplus.
And
I said it
guys,
twice.
remember, we're adding contingency too.
Yes, that's important.
Can
But we
I
almost
ask for
need to
something
add
from
the
you, Steve?
contingency unless we cut expenses. I mean, you can't cut the contingency out right now because we took that away from the Board of Ed realistically to offset whatever we have coming. We have unknowns of expenses of opening up the town as well as opening up the schools.
Yeah.
So we really cut ourselves thin. I think
We didn't cut, we added contingency. There was some, everything you had, it's up here in operating, what we had before in contingency.
right.
But
I understand that.
this contingency is the new COVID contingency. The part Ricky's model where we take the extra revenue from last year, the net amount, and part all that money for EMS.
When do we present to the town?
521,
12.
512. Okay,
5/12. That leaves
Yeah.
one week between now and then.
Hey,
Glenn,
can I ask
Glenn,
something
can
of you,
I-
Steve?
Glenn, can I ask, this is Harry, can I ask Steve and Marcia a quick question?
No. I'm sorry. This is the Board of Finance meeting. It's not a conversation, Harry. I'm sorry.
All right, I'm sorry, okay.
Let
Ricky,
Ricky
go ahead.
ask his question.
Can we get an impact analysis of, because I'm seeing some low hanging fruit on the capital side. I mean, we have 1.5 million of spending for paving. What would that impact be if we cut it down to 1.25? Can we see what that would be over the next 2 years, and then we could slowly bring it back up if we really need to? I mean, I'd like to see that.
Yes, this is what I was suggesting, is that we put together for you guys a budget that achieves a 0% increase in the mill rate for this year. And show you where we're taking cuts, where we're managing things, and allow you to say yes or no to that.
And this is in conversation with the education side?
No, because the Board of Ed has not been really forthcoming in how they would achieve their savings. I know they say if the schools are close to the end of the year, they'll have like I think a 700,000.
400,000, 400.
400,000? Oh, thank you, Glenn. We need to get to a budget that everybody can agree to. And I think Marcia's presented, I mean, she runs the numbers left and right, upside and down. But I think we should present to you a budget by Monday, so you get to look at it, that you can agree to, and then present to the town. I think it's Wednesday is your public meeting? Is that right,
Not
Glenn?
next Wednesday, the following Wednesday, but we would meet next Wednesday to talk about it and decide on it.
So give us a week and we'll present to you a budget based on all the conversations we've had that I think you guys would look at and approve.
This wasn't designed to be
I'm
understood.
sorry, Marcia, we can barely hear you.
This wasn't designed to be presented. This was designed as a working document.
Agreed. But I think we need to present a new budget.
I agree, Steve, wholeheartedly, behind you 1,000% on that. But I think Eileen's point is, I think really it becomes you, Marcia, John, Ken, Rosa sitting in a room that's not a one-sided room, that all of you are the brain trusts of these budgets. You people own these budgets. You own the town side, Dr. Brill owns the school side with the Board of Ed. I don't think it should be a one-sided event. I think this has to be a two-sided event with our town leaders. Am I missing something?
I agree. And as long as Rosa and the Board of Education are willing to do that, the Board of Selectmen is more than willing to do that.
All right, Rosa, I think we've talked enough. Why don't you come in now and see what you can bring to this?
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. If somebody could just turn that permission on, that would be great.
All right, you should be all set for that.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry. So, sorry, I'm trying to get back up here. All right. All right, so this slide is familiar. I'm going to skip over that. We've gone over what our major exposures are this year. This is a slide that, the same exact slide that I presented to you last week. It details the various normal budget variances that we're experiencing. I've highlighted any changes from last week in yellow. So this aligns with what Marcia was saying in terms of a loss of revenue. We just learned today actually that we'll see a $55,000 loss in the ECS funding, and that's from money that was not spent last year. So that brings our normal budgetary dynamics more in the realm of this $83,000 number that you see here in terms of a net underrun. The shift to distance learning still remains the same. All of this on this page is what you're seeing just if schools are closed through May 20th. So you see down here at the bottom that this number is was around, I believe, I think this was the $91,000 number that is now more accurate, around 36,000.
So we lost 60,000. We went the wrong way on 60,000.
Yeah, it's mostly because of that same, the same issue, that loss of revenue. However, if the schools are closed through the end of the year, we have seen a few other adjustments that we are making, and that has gone up a little bit since last week, even considering the loss in revenue that's gone up. So I can detail those for you a little bit on the next slide.
Well, Rosa, Mark here, sorry to interrupt. I don't see a way in the next 2 weeks for us to make a determination. There's no way we're going to know whether you're going to be closed to the end of the school year by then. So I think we have to go into the assumption you're only closed to the 20th.
And, that's, yeah, I mean, I think everybody is sort of understanding, or at least assuming, that we're going to be close to the end of the year. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we're not really going to know until, I would say, mid-May, but this is, just where we're at. So we were, it seemed like you guys had wanted some information in terms of where we would go if further reductions were sort of imminent. And we classified those into 5 different tiers. And the first tier I already talked about last week. That was the 90,000 approximate costs that are one-time purchases. So they're not going to create, a false explosion or increase in in the budget 2 years from now. So these are one-time purchases that we can buy now for next year. Those originally lined up pretty nicely with the $90,000 underrun that we thought we would be having. So this really isn't even achievable anymore unless we are closed farther out than May 20th. Because of course, right now we're really only looking at about a $36,000 underrun. Beyond that, we took a look at our tier 2 reductions. These are a closer inspection of budget to actuals and other adjustments. So we went back to every department head and every school administrator, and we said, can you get any closer on what you are actually spending this year in various accounts? And what we came up with was about 40 various accounts that can be adjusted by a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, maybe $1,000 in terms of what was budgeted to actual. And we ended up coming up with about $61,000 in adjustments. So these are savings that we can realize. Additionally, we had already talked
So
about.
we're back to the 90,000 that we had last week. We had 90,000. So tier 1 and tier 2 now are now netting the same 90,000.
Looks like it, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
On top of, we had already talked about increasing the cafeteria fund use to 60. We had originally, you know, after the original Board of Finance or Board of Selectmen adjustment, we had originally taken out 30 from that account. So we can increase that probably safely to 60. And that is going to get us to our tier 2 reductions. Beyond that, so here you see we've talked about tier 1 and tier 2. Beyond that, we will most likely look to strategically reduce investments. We'll have to go back to the drawing board and reprioritize. We do not want to lose the progress that we're on. When schools open, and they will eventually reopen, if we are playing a severe game of catch up, it is going to be detrimental to our students. So our priority is still to try to continually move ahead, always and always, and strategically reduce investments where we think we can do that. Beyond that, you really get into some more severe reductions, eliminating K through 6 Spanish and increasing class sizes. Now, K through 6 Spanish is not a mandatory thing. So we, as of right now, are prioritizing that as a reduction over increasing class sizes and, you know, laying off teachers and staff. So that is essentially where we stand right now. We have gotten as tight as we possibly can in terms of budget adjustments. So is there any questions so far?
What are the savings behind tier 3, tier 4?
The K through 6 Spanish is about, I want to say about 200,000. It's a larger program. It costs about 400,000 to run, but when we eliminate that, in the middle school, it's not so much of a problem because they can just increase instructional time in social studies, most likely, which is where they're getting their Spanish right now, is a push-in. But in the elementary schools, Spanish is a special. So we would have to then backfill that with some sort of programming. So we won't see the full $400,000 in savings. It'll be more around 200.
Yeah, Rose, I actually think I remember that meeting. I think you were less than 200 a little bit, to be fair.
Yeah.
I'm shooting off numbers off your hip. And I appreciate you putting a number, but I think from my memory, it was a little less than 200.
Yeah.
Now on your tier 5, Rosa, you're not really laying off staff. You have, and I'm not saying this is the answer, I just want to understand the line item. You have how many new positions that you haven't hired yet in your budget?
Yeah, well, you know, it would have to be really strategic about that because where we increase class sizes, we would try to keep it as far away from, you know, the elementary school as possible. So, you know, the new hires, let's say for the increased enrollment at center school would probably still remain. And we would probably look, you know, I would think towards the, you know, the older grades.
Okay.
But, you know, that's sort of a discussion that we would have to have. But, you know, 6 to 7 full-time FTEs would probably be, or 6 to 7 FTEs would probably be around 500,000. So.
What about tier 3?
Our strategic investments, I don't have the number off the top of my head. We would have to look at what is super important in terms of what will keep us going. In terms of moving forward, we have to prioritize math. I don't think we would probably get rid of the math interventionist. That's something that is really important to the work that we need to do. But we would probably just start to look at, you know, some of the other upgrades at the high school, the graphic lab, you know, the handwriting texts for grades 2 and 3. These are, you know, recurring expenses that are new investments that we've, for initiatives that we started, and we would probably just start to pull back on those.
Can I ask you a hypothetical?
Yeah.
St. Joe's last year, they had an article about how they were consolidating all their classrooms and stuff. So to me, that was a red flag. They weren't doing too well. What would happen if they closed? Would you just expect to absorb a majority of that enrollment?
I don't know about a majority. Myself, and they have about 100 students in their total enrollment. I don't know how many of those students are living in Brookfield. And then I also don't know, of those students that are from Brookfield, how many would scramble to find other private schooling, or how many of those would just enroll, you know, in Brookfield schools. And then of those that actually do enroll in Brookfield schools, what's sort of the spread, you know, because they're pre-K through 8. So, you know, if they were evenly distributed, it might not be that big of an issue. But you know, you might have like a grade that all of a sudden bubbles.
Okay.
So we would have to have sort of that information, you know, from them if they were, and what the, you know, the spread of those students are.
Okay.
Yeah. We also don't know how many, you know, parents are going to appreciate the experience of homeschooling their kids and maybe continue to homeschool them. But I also think St. Joe's, the vast majority of those kids don't.
Sorry.
The vast majority of the kids
that's hysterical.
in St. Joe's don't actually live in Brookfield. So I'm not sure what our exposure there would be, but probably somebody could ask them.
Yep.
Anybody else want to make a comment? Okay, go ahead, Rosa.
So the other things that we, you know, we need to keep an eye on, and Marcia had pointed this out, was the unemployment and health insurance. I had mentioned that last week. We are now starting to look at the extended school year. Now, this could go either way. This could be a cost to us if we have to, you know, have this extended school year go throughout the summer, and there may be costs associated with that that is going to take away from our savings that we had listed, or it could be, you know, a savings. If we start looking towards next year, and this is really, you know, only a more extended closure, but if we are looking at extra cleaning supplies, and, you know, there are some discussions of on a state level, not sort of in Brookfield specifically, but students going back to school but wearing masks. We've, you know, some districts are talking about alternating days, and there's a lot of crazy plans that are sort of floating around out there, and it's all still very fluid and up in the air. But you know, we started sort of looking at what those additional costs might be, and of course, if we continue with distance learning, you know, there may be technology issues that or technology enhancements that we may need. So just some items to watch, and just to let you know some of the things that we are keeping an eye on in terms of executive orders, and how, you know, a more extended closure might affect us in terms of additional expenses. So at the bottom here, I just wanted to sort of summarize, you know, the various accounts that, you know, we might see that would essentially go back to the town if the schools were closed through the end of the year. Of course, we've talked about the student activity fund, our quote unquote non-lapsing fund, and the net surplus, if those pull ahead purchases were made, is around 365. So that's just a number that's going to change depending on what that surplus really looks like. So those are just items to keep in mind. And then the last page here is something that we had shared last week, and then the full file of this, I believe, was shared even before that. So, you know, I do believe that the Board of Ed has been forthcoming in terms of where we're seeing these savings. In particular, something that's changed just from last week to the good is people transportation. So we finally got an agreement from All-Star, and it looks like we are going to be saving more than we had originally anticipated. So that's where that sort of the total hypothetical impact if the schools remain closed has really come from. So that increase is mainly driven by an even larger savings than we had originally anticipated for in-district transportation. And that's pretty much it. That's, that's changes from last week. So are there any questions?
I appreciate the additional tiers that you added. I think that really helped illustrate some of the efforts you're looking forward to what could potentially be the actions taken by the board. And I know that those are, we really want to see the schools moving forward, but and those would be some tough decisions to make, but I appreciate that you guys have spent the time to look at that.
Yeah, of course.
I agree with that. Absolutely. Really hard work, really well presented. So thank you very much.
Yeah, Rosa, it's really amazing. And on a side note, that you guys were complimented by other towns that I spoke to about your detail recently and savings, whereas it wasn't happening elsewhere. So
yeah, that was I'm part of like a group of other board chairs around the state, and we've been sharing a lot of information, and I think other districts have not really dug into every single line item and just tried to squeeze savings here and there, and actually realized just real savings just from the closure. So I think it's a good overall collaborative thing we have going here.
Thank you so much.
I also would like to say, Rosa, nice job tonight. I appreciate it. I mean, you came forth and you gave us things to look at and to discuss in this time that we really need to make discussions. One thing I'm going to circle back on, though, is we really need, you came a long way and you're doing a great job, but we really need to circle around a little bit and get closer, because what I'm missing tonight, maybe I'm not missing it, is we've received notice from CIRMA on a reduction of the workman's comp on the town side of 8,000. Does that correlate over to your side? And this working,
it does actually.
Okay, so you have that in here somewhere?
Yeah, so you see the 61,000 number?
Yeah.
So that's actually it was actually a $6,000 adjustment for workers' comp. This is for next year.
So why was yours less than the town side when your payroll is bigger than the town?
I don't know. It was
the town was 8,000. We got told like 8,065 if I pick off of Marcia's slide from memory.
Yeah, I don't know why it would be so much less. It was around, I think it was 6,100 something.
I would have assumed yours would have had double the towns.
No, ours, we do a bigger percentage because we have police officers and.
All right, you won. Good call. Now it makes sense. It makes sense now. All right. So you're doing good. So I take it all back. I'll take those last few sentences back.
Okay.
And I should also point out that I just told them about, because I just opened the email today, I just told them about the workers' comp probably about 2 o'clock this afternoon. So nice getting it in there tonight.
All right, then kudos all around. How's that?
Yeah.
I think to go back to, unless anybody else has comments, I mean, I'm willing to listen, is I think Steve, Marcia, Ken, Dr. Burrill, and yourself need to sort of go through this and look at all these possibilities together. You guys are our brain trust of owning these budgets and come back. I mean, you made a nice list, like Eileen said, of where it could go. I think y'all got to sit down in a room and come back to something with us by Monday that you feel comfortable. I don't think 4.87 is going to go. I mean, I think we got to get it down more in this time of need. So other comments from our boards? I mean, go ahead. Dan, you got a comment? Throw one out there, please.
Can I ask a question first?
Go ahead.
So are you directing the Board of Ed to make further reductions in terms of tier 3 and beyond, but to a sort
I
of
am not, let's
number?
be clear. I am not at this time. I am not directing anything as my part of this process, and I don't know how the board feels. What I am saying is you've listed off these possible points to look at savings. Steve also has a list of possible points of savings. As our board, we need to look at the total list of which you've all talked about as brain trusts, and as Marcia being the, the money person on the town side, and Steve sitting at the big chair, something that you all can live with that brings this number down. I'm not gonna say a number. I'm gonna say you guys own the budget process at this point, knowing what we know with the savings and everything else that we have and the crisis we're in, to rethink what you can do to reduce this down that makes sense in your eyes, that then we can look at as a board of finance and may add to that, may take away from that. I don't think we want to dictate anything right now. I think we got so much information tonight that you, Steve, and you have to own budgets. And we need to look at getting the 4.87 number down. That may be you saying, or Stephen, you saying, hey, that 400,000, if the schools are closed, we reduce the budget by it, and you put a non-lapsing fund to 463, and you find out that later in the year before the school starts that you were out for the whole year, and you can utilize that towards some of your priorities. I don't have answers. I'm saying you got to look at it as a group and see what comes up as a plan. I'll put it out to the other board members. That's how I feel. So other board members, please jump in.
So Rosa, I want to commend you on you and your team doing a great job. I probably don't compliment. I always seem like I'm the negative person, but I appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing. I really do. Now, I'm interested in seeing what your reductions, your tier 1 through 5, what the number of them, dollar amount associated with them would be. But I'm also an adult. I can look at a number of a tier 5, whatever that savings is going to, it could be a $5 million savings. And I'm going to say to myself, I'm not firing 6 to 7 FTEs. We got to be adults about it. But I think as a board of finance, we would like to see, I would certainly like to see the numbers we're talking about. Doesn't mean we're going to do it. It certainly doesn't mean that you want us to do it, but it's a reasonable approach to looking at something while we're in this crisis situation.
Okay. I mean, I can easily sort of give you sort of an estimate on tier 4 and 5 right now. Tier 3 is something that we would have to dig a little deeper and sort of reprioritize. It probably wouldn't be a huge amount. It would probably be, less than 200,000 in terms of investments. The K through 6 Spanish, we had talked about, in thinking about what we would end up backfilling the K through 4 Spanish time with. It would probably be around $200,000. So, that's really what you're looking at. And 6 to 7 FTEs is about 500,000. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you're just giving those to us, but if we have it in some sort of paper form, or electronic form, it's a little easier than me trying to take random notes here. That's what I'm getting at. But I want to stress, I appreciate what you guys are doing. And by me asking that does not mean I'm trying to cut teachers. I want to be very clear about that.
Right.
Dan, since you're next on the screen.
I don't have much to add. We've been through a lot here. Fiscal responsibility and just general business sense says when you lose revenues, you got to lose expenses to match. And this is going to be really hard. I don't know the answer. I'm interested in seeing scenarios and doing cost benefit, but the cost includes major tax increases to people. That's a cost that's real, and I don't see how we get around that. So this is not the direction I was hoping to go tonight, but unfortunately it is. That's all on that. I do want to, I've done it privately, but I do want to publicly apologize to Harry Shaker. I lashed out trying to keep decorum, and that was not necessarily called for. So I'm sorry, Harry.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add? Brianna, why don't you jump in next? You're next on the screen.
I'm a little overwhelmed by everything I've taken in tonight. So I just think I need to take it in, but I kind of, as simple in my math is if you have a reduction in revenue, you have to have a reduction in expenses. So But again, a lot of information. I just need to take it all in. I've talked to other towns. So yeah, I don't have much to add. I'm really sorry.
Ricky?
I think my sentiment is the same as everybody else's. I want to see where everything lies before. I mean, it seems like information keeps changing. And I don't know, looking forward to getting those budget models to really see where everything lies. That's it.
Eileen?
Yeah, it's a bit of a disappointment with the news that we had today about, the numbers changing, and, I was feeling pretty good about where things were heading from our previous meetings. It's just a bit to take in tonight, and, kind of process it and see where it goes. And again, just to reiterate the work that Marcia put in with Steve and John Lucas or whatever to look at these numbers. I think that helps us to understand, what we're facing, and Rosa and your team for putting together this stuff. And I think we just need to look at it again, and hopefully we can come to some solution that works as best as it can for as many people as it can.
Steve, you want to jump
Yeah,
in here?
yeah, I know a lot of the information we've given you tonight is not information that anyone likes, but we would be remiss if we didn't look at all the difficulties that we might face over the next year. So we're committed to giving you the information that you need to set a good budget. And we're going to look at both revenues and expenses as we went through it tonight. And most towns aren't doing that. Most towns are just saying, well, we're going to cut here, we're going to cut there. They don't realize what's going to happen or what the worst case scenario is going to be. And we're looking at that. So we're going to present budgets to you as we agreed before. That full budgets, you look at them and say, does that make sense or no? And I really, really appreciate all of you spending the amount of time that you are doing on this. Most towns are not doing it. Thank you.
Marcia?
I think I would just agree with what Steve said.
I actually agree with Steve on this whole process too. We don't want to put the first selectman or anybody in a bad position by trying to get to a 0% if it's not achievable. And I'm not throwing that number. I'm just saying we can't put you behind an 8-ball for the sake of putting you behind an 8-ball and then looking at a problem 2 years down the road that's unsurmountable. That's not fair to you guys. But I think again, the 4.87 number is just too high to go. And I know, Steve, you said worst case, you're going to work at it. So I'm not saying, but I think it has to really be worked on. And we might have to feel a little pain on all sides. I mean, and that's why I'm saying if you could speak with the Board of Ed and speak with Dr. Burrill and figure out a way forward. And if you could get us something by Monday, I mean, that would be great. So we could, look at it on Tuesday and be prepared for Wednesday. On your model, Marcia, I'm sort of in agreement. I understand all the intricacies behind it, but I like Steve's idea of putting it back in maybe the original budget, because we're not going to have weeks to suck this data in. We're only going to have a week to suck it in. So it has to be as simplified as possible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was not for presentation. That was for working.
We appreciate all the work and the thought, and you and Steve put behind it to get to that. But I think for us to make a decision, it has to be simplified to the point of, like Steve said, we can understand it on a line item basis. That makes sense.
So residents can understand it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. So, and Rosa, you understand the situation we're in. Your list showed it. I mean, if you guys can work with Steve and Marcia and figure out a way and take suggestions from each other and try to work through it, it'd be awesome from our point of view. So I think
Will do.
in the end, I think that's the only way we can go forward is, to do the best we can.
No, I will, can I don't want to be sort of a Debbie Downer, but the board is not going to meet. And even if we had a special meeting, I cannot go into, a Board of Education meeting and start saying, asking, what can we really live without? Because all of these things that we have planned, and investments are not just sort of nice to haves, even though that word sort of sounds that way, but they are things that meet existing needs. And sort of if we had direction in terms of, listen, everybody, we have to sort of make a Sophie's choice here. We have to make those hard decisions. We will do that. And we've done that in the past, and we've done that already this year. But it cannot be the Board of Ed that is, making those decisions of let's just cut this, even though we have no direction to do that. So, I want to work collaboratively, but if you and I know that you guys don't have that number. I can see your process, and I've listened to your meetings. You don't have that number that you need from us, but if there's a ballpark, that's something that we can maybe work with. But for a Board of Ed to proactively cut their budget, I don't, that's, we've been very vocal about standing behind what we need, and we can't.
Absolutely. I agree with what you're saying, but I think now, in my opinion, we're at a point beyond regular. We're no longer normal. We are beyond normalcy by 10 degrees, and now it's a different time. And, we've all talked about this separately as a Board of Finance. I believe we don't want to call the number, but I mean, we're not afraid to call a number, but I don't think it's a number any of you really going to want to live with. I think that it's better you guys come to us with a number that makes sense to you, because, us dictating a number down, we could throw that out now. We could say, I want the number to be 1.5%, because that was a number last week we were looking at the 2% where we were at with Marcia's deductions and your 30,000. We were at 1.5% increase overall. So, I mean, as a board, we could say 1.5% increase overall. That's where we want to go. And then we could say that 1.5% has to be 30% from Steve's side and 66% from the Board of Ed side, and dictate it down. But does that make sense to do that? I mean, or is it better if you all sit in a room and say, Steve says, well, I can give you 400,000 here, and you say, well, I can do 300,000 here, and we get to a number that's maybe 2.2% that you can sell to us. This is no longer normalcy. I mean, if you want to dictate a number, the number is 1.5%. I mean, we'll dictate a number. But
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is if we're gonna get to that point anyways, then we're gonna get to that point.
No, that we shouldn't be dictating a number. The number should be through careful process and speaking on all sides of ownership of these budgets. Steve owns a part of the budget, and you guys own 2/3 of the budget. This should be a collaborative, hey, we're in a crisis mode. This is what we need to do. Steve and you guys sit down and talk like the leaders, the leaders that we have, Dr. Burrill, and you come up with a number. Because again, Dan and I've talked about this numerous times. Our business sense could dictate a number. We're not afraid of dictating a number, but what good is us dictating a number that handcuffs you and Steve?
And can I just add a little bit to that, Glenn?
Yeah.
So, the slippery slope in that approach, Rosa, is then we go through and if we're the ones kind of dictating the number, then we're the ones saying, well, we can cut this piece out and this piece out and that piece out, and we're actually managing the Board of Ed budget. We all know that's not our role. That's not what we want to do. I think ideally it would be, here's the budget with no cuts, here's the budget with tier 1 cuts, here's the budget with tier 2 cuts, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, and then we can kind of pick. Maybe that's the way to go, because I don't want to sit here next week and say, well, they can fire 3 teachers and they can get rid of, that's not our job. And I don't want to, and that's the only way.
Exactly. But I mean, I think how you described it is more managing those funds, because if I give you options to choose from of things we'll cut and you get to decide what those cuts are going to be, then that's you deciding.
Well, but it is us deciding. It's coming up with, so here's the impact here. here, it's an impact analysis. We would like to cut this, and this is what the impact would be. All right, if we cut this, this is what the impact would be. That way we can have when we are dictating these cuts, which is what we have to do, what the governor has told us we have to do, we can understand what that impact is, as opposed to dictating a cut without knowing the impact.
And
All right, so let me see if I give you guys, what Mark had suggested, which was sort of a more something a little more itemized in terms of the tier 1 through, or the tier 3 through 5 sort of reductions. Understanding that those are hypothetical, because at this point, anything past tier 2 is not something that we are, can quote unquote live without. So, if I get that information to you, is that helpful, or is,
Yeah.
Well, no, because now I'm going back. Tier 1 cuts are not a cut. Tier
true?
1 cuts are, we're giving you the money out of your surplus to allow you to spend it next year. So that's not really a reduction. It's a numbers reduction, but you're not losing anything on your side. You
Well, to be
that
fair,
91,000, you're whole. Whether we
to
take
be
it
fair,
from
we
you
could
here,
spend that
put
money.
it
It's
in the
our
bank.
surplus. To be
But
fair.
it's not a reduction. It's a wash. Whether
Yeah,
you come up
okay, fine. Anything beyond tier 2 that I've listed is
Tier
not
2
something we are
Tier
quote
2
unquote prepared to live
initiates
without.
$60,000 worth of cuts, of which 6,000 of it's a actual CIRMA to thing, 6,000 of that. So we're really talking now $50,000. We're asking Steve for hundreds of thousands of dollars on his side. We're telling Steve we're looking at taking 250,000 from paving. We're taking things that aren't. He stands by the goal of paving at 1.5. We have models that say we need 1.5 million to pave. Optimum is we need 1. But yet we're digging into Steve's pocket saying we're taking 250 out of his pocket. Actual reduction if we decide to take that. What we've got from you, actual reductions at this time, other than tier 3, 4, and 5, is $60,000. And part of that is using the lunch fund, extra 30,000, which is an outside fund. 6,000 of it's CIRMA. So now we're really talking 20,000 bucks, which is appreciated. But in the big picture, right now, the Board of Ed has maintained every goal outlined by the superintendent in his budget. Every goal listed in your budget process has been met at the current thing. We funded you. You're whole. You are whole on every front. There's little reductions. There's little nuances and pains. Yes. But as a general thing, you are whole. You have not. We are going to take from Steve right now.
Yeah, I
Steve's gonna-
understand that, but I'm not going to equate, students' education and performance to road paving, because we may be able to get by another year without a certain amount of road paving. I don't know the details on that. That's
I'll ask
sort
you
of a
the
finite
question
thing.
here.
When you're talking about performance in education, that's
Absolutely.
not something where we can say, oh, we can do another year without that and everything will be exactly the same. Any further reductions means it will not be exactly the same. So you're asking me to say, what can we live without? You're asking me to say, what are we willing to literally go backwards on?
Help the town out with, in a crisis, that we're looking at a 4.87 increase that would never pass the vote in the town right now. We're looking at help from the Board of Ed and guidance from you, from your side, to say, hey, we understand the position you're in. We understand the position the town is in, and we are going to suggest that this is the way. Don't make it seem like, well, here it is, and now the Board of Finance got to take the money, because I don't want to be in the position of taking money. I want to be in the position of working together collaboratively and get it to the point of where we need to go. I'll tell you right now, of the 3 towns that we talked to, they're not hiring teachers at $80,000 or $90,000 anymore. They got rid of the high end and they're bringing in low end $50,000 teachers.
And they're not Brookfield. And to be honest, I don't really want to compare Brookfield to other towns. So, everybody does things a little bit
We're good.
differently,
You're
but
not getting my
proof is in the
point. We're
pudding.
good right now, and it'll come down to a point where it's going to be a number. I really tried to appeal to you saying, hey, we understand the situation. And I think, again, we're going to reach into Steve's pocket. Steve's pocket's only 17 million or 18 million of this whole budget. And we're reaching into Steve's pocket. We're taking money out.
All right, so can I ask a hypothetical then? If I come back and I say, all right, we found $100,000 worth of things that we can just sort of live without, and you're not happy with that number, you're going to reduce further anyways, right? So
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's what we want to see happen, and that's what we need to see happen. Otherwise, it's got to be a number that we pick. And again, that's not conducive to anything, to anybody's good health here. I think this becomes, Marcia's looked at everything. Steve's turning over all the rocks. Steve's looking at everything possible and suggesting going forward with it. And you put out, here's the possible savings. You guys make the choice. Steve is saying, here, this is what we got. I don't like it, but I'm going to give you this. Marcia's saying, I don't like it, but I'm going to give you this. And I'm not saying there's any answers in there, but what I'm saying is it sure would be nice to say, hey, you guys aren't the bad guys, and we understand 4.4% ain't going to pass, or isn't a number that's soluble, that you got to help. I mean, I don't want to make the
I mean,
decision.
I understand what you're saying, but this is coming down to sort of stuff that we should probably, talk about offline, because I mean, at the end of the day, like, if the Board of Finance doesn't want to be the bad guy and the Board of Ed can't be the bad guy, I mean, there's literally nobody out there looking out for the kids. So, I mean, that is what we were elected to do, is to put that first and foremost. You are elected to prioritize that in the scope of the rest of the town's priorities. So, I mean,
No, I'm going to
have an incredibly difficult position, but it is your position.
I sort of going to disagree with you in this concept. Never before have 6 people voted on a budget for the town in the history of Brookfield. So we are in such a unique position right now, Rosa, that we need the help of everybody. We need everybody to come to this table. And 4.87, where we sit now, is not, we have so many people writing us that 0%, go to 0%. Other towns are going to 0%. And we have a lot of people writing, we should remain the same at 3.56.
And maybe they were heavily invested in
right now.
prior
We're not
to all
at
this.
3.56 anymore. We're at 4.87.
Yep.
So we've increased it from the budget that we've passed over $1 million. And this is unprecedented territory. So I, as a Board of Finance member, do not want to dictate a number. I want the number to flow down. And again, we've talked about this as a board. If you want the board to dictate a number based on fiscal responsibility, payments, looking at next year's budget increase, which is already, how much is next year's budget increase, Steve?
Well,
6 and change.
yeah. Well, what do you mean by what's in it? I'm not sure what you're.
Without doing any more cuts right now. Yes.
Right now, if it stood, what is next year's budget? It's like 5%.
That doesn't include the increase in salaries.
And that's that's projecting the Board of Ed at a 3% increase. That number, that's consolidated. So these numbers, Rosa, are huge going forward. And that's what I'm trying to say is we're willing to make the hard decisions. We don't want to make a hard decision. We'd rather have a consolidated agreement. And at that point, I'll end it. But I think we need help, is what I'm trying to say. So I appreciate it. I guess we'll move on. Anybody else got a comment?
Well, I do, because when I made my comment before, I thought we were just talking to Rosa when I was speaking to her. So to my comment that I wanted to make as we end the meeting, the first is, right now we have one more meeting before our presentation to the town, or before your presentation to the town. I would suggest that we schedule a special meeting for Monday, the 11th, since you're presenting on Tuesday, the 12th, because the rate we're going, we're not figuring anything out a week from today. If we don't need the meeting, we don't take it. But if we don't schedule it now, we could be in big trouble.
I can agree to scheduling it, but I think we got to make a decision next week based on what we get. I mean, I'm at the point of, it's no longer, I think we're no longer in the productive stage anymore.
I feel like we went nowhere and probably backwards today, to no one's fault, but we're behind where we were when I woke up this morning.
I think come Monday, we need information from Steve, like he said. We need to see what Steve and Marcia put together. I understand Rose's position from the Board of Ed side. I think that we pretty much were going to get the tier cuts in the dollar amounts and then we
Just
decide.
Glenn, if we stuck to an original schedule, if Steve and the Board of Selectmen hadn't granted us an extension, we would have had no idea about this lost revenue. If we had voted on this yesterday, we would have had no idea about this lost revenue. Every day we can extend out is a day we have to get more information, good or bad. And we owe it to try to do that. I still would like to make a decision on the 6th, but if more information comes available, I think it would be smart for us to meet on the 11th to put final, if anything else came forward. I think we deserve the opportunity. The taxpayer deserves us making that effort.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Mark. I think that, the 11th, presenting to the town and everything we know up to that minute is probably a good idea and important. Remember that we're not setting the budget on the 12th. After that, we still have 2 weeks to make further changes based upon public comment. But I agree that presenting up to the minute, that's a, would be valuable.
Okay.
So Glenn, you can do what you want with that. The other thing I just real quick have to say, I just want to, I know I sound like I beat a dead drum all the time. The new Marist poll came out. 50% of the people are out of work or have a member in their family out of work in the country. And we all know that the Northeast and Connecticut is harder hit than the average part of the country. That means Brookfield should have over 50% of people have no job or their wife or husband has no job and they're down to one income. It's huge. It's unprecedented. And I know we're all taking it serious, but it just makes me sick thinking about it.
Well, can I just jump in there?
Of course.
Mark, you said that to me. 50% of people have either lost their jobs or had declined hours or income.
No.
50% of people did not lose their jobs.
No. Well, had their hours reduced because of coronavirus or been let go.
I agree.
Not that they chose. You cannot say they chose to take less hours.
No, I agree with you, but 50% of the people did not lose their jobs.
Lose their jobs or have their work hours reduced because of coronavirus.
Okay.
And that does not, and then it very clearly states, if you were already retired or not employed, state no. So that clearly does not take into consideration. It's just a huge number we're looking at.
I agree. All right. Any other closing comments? Public comment?
Yeah, Laura Orban would like to speak.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Laura. Welcome aboard.
Hi, Laura. Yes, we can.
Thank you. Laura Orban, 95 Stony Hill Road. And I really do appreciate this grueling job that you're all going through, and an appreciation. I'll be brief. I just want to say that I understand the need to be responsible and if revenue goes down, expenses have to go down. I just would ask, I guess, that you not necessarily equate cuts to the school as like helping the town. I don't feel personally that taking away programs from the schools is helpful. Like I don't see that as a benefit. I feel that it's kind of like a recurring thing that every year we say, well, this isn't a good year. This is a tough year. This definitely is extraordinarily tough, but we have said that as a town, we're not big on investing in the schools. And so now that we're at this point, there's been a lot of things that we haven't invested in. And so to not invest further, it's just not something that I see as helpful. So I guess I would just ask that we try not to position it as a help, because kids are losing out and they don't get to go through these grades again. So that's all I wanted to say, but thank you again for all your efforts. I really do appreciate it. And I know you have a very tough job. especially without a vote this year. So thanks for everything you're doing.
Okay, thank you. I will add to that. Laura and I spoke today, and she brought up some good points about what we're not looking at is also the expenses of going back to school and CDC. What are they going to dictate to us? 6-foot spacing in classrooms could be part of this. The busing, how do you separate children on the buses to social distance? Cafeteria wise, how do we fit them in? So Laura brought up some good points on the other side as well that I think should be mentioned in tonight's meeting. So I just wanted to add that. She brought some good points to think about in this whole process. So with that, any other comments from the board?
Glenn, can I make a
Oh yeah, public comment, Harry, go ahead.
Harry Shaker,
State your name and address, please.
You're
87 Long Meadow Hill Road.
perfectly allowed, Harry.
Oh, my goodness. Boy, does this bring me back to the Board of Ed days at 12:30 in the morning. I first off want to I know that there's only a few people on now, but I don't know how to show my gratitude to everybody who is working on this. It's incredible. I also want to remind people that I sat on a board where we were going to put a 3.5% to 4% increase in spending on education, and we were given a -0.5% budget. And we had to sit at a table and cut 3.75% of our budget. And we never said, well, you know, we can't do away with anything. I am absolutely pro education, but there are times when, you know, you do have to look at things that are gonna have to be lost that you don't want to lose. And I've been in that position. I really think that, and I agree with Mark. You're in a position that's so difficult, and whatever number you come up with, no one can say that it was irresponsible to do this or irresponsible to do that. I think you're going above and beyond trying to get to where you are. But I'll be honest with you, as a resident, I'm a little disappointed at the Board of Ed arching their back here and just kind of saying they don't want to cut anything, and they can't cut anything. And I'm not saying what to cut or what not to cut, but I think you have to go in this with a little bit more of an open mind. And to think that the Board of Ed is going to go forward with a 4.5% increase with what's going on. And this is coming from a 14-year-old Board of Ed member. I just don't, to be honest with you, I don't like the attitude. And I just think that it's a bad reflection. And even if we go forward I'm just kind of at a loss of words. I just was taken back by that attitude. And again, Rose, I'm not trying to come down on you. I understand where you are because I have been there. But I think that we need to continue working together. And I like your idea of them working with Steve and Marcia to come up with some answers. But bottom line is, no one can fault this Board of Finance for not putting in the time, the effort, and going overboard and above and beyond. And I really appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you very much.
Harry.
Thank you. All right, anybody else?
I believe Anthony Capiello was looking to speak.
Name, address, please.
Anthony Capiello, 135 Candlewood Lake Road. And, I too want to thank everybody. These are extraordinary times. And I appreciate your hard work. And it's a very difficult decision. So one thing that I got from it, though, is that seem to be planning for the worst case. And I hope it doesn't become a self-fulfilling prophecy by becoming too draconian. I like the Board of Ed has taken, a strong position, whether it's 4% or 3%, the numbers, I hope they don't mean too much. I hear a lot of numbers thrown around, and try and do what's best, what's right. And thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thanks again for the job you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Mark, this is your favorite part of the meeting. Step on in.
I spoke a lot tonight. Let's let Ricky do it, or somebody, Eileen or somebody.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Thanks, Rosa. Goodbye.